Hey there, curious history buffs. Have you heard the legend of the ancient race of giants of Nevada? Yes, I'm talking about actual giants that allegedly lived thousands of years ago. Now I know what you're thinking. Giants, really? Well, archaeological finds add fuel to this debate too. And here's where it gets interesting. Lovelock Cave was indeed used as a burial site, and some of the remains found there are much larger than average human bones. The cave is by the Humboldt Sink in western Nevada. It was once part of an enormous lake, which eventually dried up, leaving a number of smaller ones, including the Humboldt Sink. The cave became the home of the Site-Ka tribe. According to the legend, these red-haired giants were so big that they had to be buried in the cave itself. Indeed, later on, archaeologists discovered 8 to 10 foot tall skeletons. This legend started to unfold when a mining engineer named John T. Reed talked to the locals in 1886. Once Reed saw the cave, he knew he was onto something. The news spread soon, but the cave was attracting another type of attention too. The deposits of a fertilizer known as guano were discovered inside the cave. So a mining company began excavating the precious resource in 1911 and soon shipped more than 250 tons of the fertilizer to San Francisco. Unfortunately, some of the human remains and artifacts were neglected and lost in the mining process. This led to an official excavation in 1912 and 1924. After the top layer of guano had been mined, strange objects started to surface. Around the area, the earliest evidence of human habitation dates back about 4,000 years. The Lovelock culture lasted for some 3,000 years, and they left us with 10,000 stunning artifacts. The pits in the cave were like a series of time capsules hidden at different depths. Archaeologists determined the age of each pit by its depth. It turns out that many different groups used the cave for storage over a really long time, and the things they stored there give us a really cool glimpse into their cultures. It's like a giant ancient storage unit full of hidden treasures. What have the researchers found besides the giant bones, you might ask? Some other bodies were mummified using a method similar to the one applied by ancient Egyptians. These remains also had something in common with the bodies discovered as far south as Lake Titicaca. Both mummies had some red hair. Yet, there are scientists who believe this reddish hue is the result of the interaction with the environment in which the bodies stayed. So, while the story of the red-haired giants may be a wild and intriguing tale, not everyone is convinced. Some experts believe that the bones found in Lovelock Cave are simply the remains of prehistoric animals, like mammoths or sloths. But others insist that there's something more to the story. Other relics, such as finely crafted baskets and exquisite duck decoys made from tule fibers, were also found there. In any case, this cave is worth the attention it gets. By the way, you can still visit this cave today and see the pits of different depths with your own eyes. But let me tell you one thing. It's in a hot, dry, and isolated place. Archaeologists have made another discovery that seems to be straight out of a legend. They think they found the palace of the one and only Odysseus, who was the legendary Greek king of Ithaca and the hero of Homer's epic poem. Move over, Indiana Jones. We've got some real-life adventure happening here from around 1300 BCE. Apparently, this is the only palace mentioned in Homer's epic poems that hasn't been found. The excavations have been made on the Ionian Islands, and the view from the ruins found on the island of Ithaca are exactly as described in the Odyssey, says the professor who led the excavation team. Known to the ancient Romans as Ulysses, the Greek hero took 10 years to return home to Ithaca after the fall of Troy. For many years, Homer's other epic, called the Iliad, which tells the story of the protracted siege of Troy by the Greeks, was regarded as a myth too. But then, in the 1870s, Troy was rediscovered in modern-day Turkey's Çanakkale city. So, if they found Troy, who's to say they couldn't find Odysseus's home? the researchers were following Homer's words as a roadmap. The excavation site has a building complex with 2 levels. It has important finds, such as storerooms and workshops, a complicated drainage system, and fragments of pottery. It also has a well from the 8th century BCE, which is around the time when Odysseus is believed to have been the king. Yet, not everyone is convinced that the team has actually discovered the home of Odysseus. A British researcher named Robert Biddlestone insists that Homer's description of ancient Ithaca isn't very similar to the island that now has its name, and that Odysseus's kingdom was actually on the Isle of Cephalonia. However, Italian archaeologist Adriano La Regina might have a more realistic approach to this debate. He says that whether this find has a connection to Ulysses or not, what's more important is the discovery of this royal palace. Once upon a time, in a land far away, the Klamath Indians spread a legend about the creation of Crater Lake. Okay, maybe this land is not that far away, and it still exists. You can find it in south central Oregon, in the western United States. Anyway, the legend has it that this lake was formed in a vicious battle between 2 volcanoes, Mount Mazama and Mount Shasta. Then the spirits of Earth and the Sky, which are Lau, who ruled the below world, and Skell, the chief of the above world, joined the fight. It turned into a geological drama. During the battle, darkness veiled the land. The fight was over when Mount Mazama collapsed and sent Lau back into the underworld. Then the rain filled the pit and created a lake in the place where the mountain had once stood. Flash forward to our time. Scientists have discovered that Mount Mazama did erupt 7,700 years ago. Artifacts found in the area prove that the legend indeed contains some details about the explosion. The tale says that red-hot rocks were flying through the sky. This happened during the volcanic eruption that caused the mountain to collapse. This created the volcanic caldera, which later on got filled with water. What makes this legend came true story unusual is how long it has existed. According to researchers, these types of verbal stories lose their credibility within 600 to 700 years. That's why the legend about the creation of Crater Lake is so unique. So many generations, for hundreds of years, have been accurately passing down the information. This volcanic crater lake is now in a national park. It's famous for its deep blue color. The water in it is extremely clear. If you visit it today, the water you'll see won't be the same as for someone who will visit the place 250 years later. Because there are no rivers flowing into or out of the lake, the existing water evaporates and the lake gets filled again by rain and snowfall. Basically, every 250 years, the water is replaced. Plus, this lake is almost 2,000 feet deep, which makes it the deepest lake in the United States. Swimming is okay in the lake, but there's only one legal and safe trail to get to the shore. There are other activities, such as fishing and boat tours. Shared human experiences, such as birth, marriage, and aging, may explain why certain tales are shared globally. Similar struggles and obstacles faced by humans around the world generate similar themes in traditional stories about love, parenting, and mortality. So, do you have legends or tales you've heard of from your grandparents? Who knows? Maybe your ancestors too witnessed a cool historical event.
In Colombia, people saw a small round object floating in the sky which then fell to the ground. They recorded it on video and picked it up. It turned out to be a strange round metal sphere. There were no turbines or propellers on it, which are common for drones. Plus, according to eyewitnesses, the sphere was cold after it fell to the ground. It weighs only 4.5 pounds, which is twice as light as a bowling ball. But the most interesting thing is what was written on it. Unknown symbols resembling the runes and writings of ancient civilizations, like those from Mesopotamia. With the help of AI, a researcher managed to decipher the mysterious inscription, and this is what it read. the origin of birth through union and energy in the cycle of transformation, meeting point of unity, expansion, and consciousness, individual consciousness. What? It sounds too philosophical and fanatical, but what do you think? Okay, the inscription is more or less clear, but what about the composition of the sphere? What is its origin? Its design differs from standard production methods since it has no welding seams and joints. Using X-rays, scientists saw the interior of the sphere. It turned out that the sphere consisted of 3 layers and had 9 to 18 microspheres inside, depending on different sources. All of them were located around the core. Obviously, many people started to claim that this was some kind of unknown technology from another planet. How it floated and why it turned out to be cold is unknown, but let's be honest. If it was really some unknown mysterious object from space, then the whole world would already be talking about it. The sphere looks like an art object or something like that. And all these tricks with hovering as well as the encrypted message seem to be part of some kind of performance. Most internet users have the same opinion, by the way. What do you think is the point of this project? Perhaps the artist wanted to show how easy it was to make people believe in extraordinary things. Or if you read the deciphered words attentively, it looks like a philosophical message encouraging us to stop ruining the planet and claiming that progress and nature must unite. But how did it fly? Perhaps the artist or someone else drew a flying sphere on a computer and added it to the recorded video and then threw it on the ground. To be honest, the sphere from Colombia is not very surprising, unlike these small spheres that were found in a 3-billion-year-old rock. It happened in South Africa in the 80s. Mysterious spheres similar to tiny cricket balls are called Klerksdorp spheres. They have a smooth surface and tiny lines running through the center. They look like they were created by some ancient cave human, but the only catch is that 3 billion years ago, there were no humans. There weren't even any dinosaurs. So who or what created these things? Many pseudoscientists say that the spheres were created by extraterrestrial civilizations. An employee of the museum where they were kept even said the spheres spun on their own. How was it possible? A thorough analysis revealed the truth. The answer was simple. The creator of the spheres is nature. These things are called concretions and are found in various places around the world. The small balls are made up of various minerals and rocks. But how does nature create them? There's a small grain of sand inside the stone. For millions and billions of years, water with minerals envelops this grain in layers, and thus, a small ball is formed. And these lines on the sphere are the traces of the stone inside which this sphere grew. But how did they roll in the museum? Very simple. Round objects can roll with the slightest push. Not far from the place where the museum is located, people mined gold. It probably caused small earthquakes, and the shaking of the ground made the spheres move. So, nothing strange here. But if these little spheres were moving and making weird loud noises, it would be pretty creepy. Fortunately, there was no such thing in the museum. But something similar happened in Jacksonville. A large metal sphere the size of a bowling ball became perhaps the most famous sphere in the world after the Betts family found it at the Fort George Island Forest in 1974. Jerry, Antoine, and their 21-year-old son Terry were walking in the woods around their private property when Terry found a mysterious metal ball. He thought it was a beautiful souvenir, so he took it with him. The strange artifact stayed in the house like a trinket. No one paid any attention to it until Terry started playing guitar. At that moment, the sphere rolled on its own. Or not. You'll find out later. It changed direction and stopped, then vibrated and made a high-pitched sound that made dogs whine and cover their ears. All the family members immediately realized that this was something bizarre. One of the first people the Betts family told about the sphere was a radio host who loved mysterious stories. It's worth noting that in the 70s, the topic of extraterrestrial civilizations was very popular. Therefore, Bet's sphere became a superstar very quickly. The radio host confirmed that the sphere was behaving quite strangely. Then, another person did it. After that, the family started inviting journalists to the house. Stories about the Bet sphere spread throughout Jacksonville, and very soon across the country. Newspapers wrote about the extraterrestrial origin of the sphere. Journalists interviewed the members of the Betts family. People seemed to be going crazy because of this story. Of course, the news about the mysterious artifact reached the country's authorities. The US Navy decided to take a look at the Betts sphere to make sure it wasn't their technology. But what if it was some kind of secret development that fell out of a plane and ended up in the hands of civilians? Fortunately for the Navy, this theory turned out to be false. They analyzed the sphere and found out that it was made of stainless steel, but they couldn't figure out who its creator was. But they knew for sure that the sphere had been made on Earth. A tiny triangular chip on the surface caused the ball to roll on the floor in different directions. In such a perfectly balanced object, even a tiny flaw could make the ball move in a strange way. Also, the construction of the house was uneven. Any light touch caused the sphere to move and change direction. The US Navy soon revealed the origin of this mysterious object. It was a large ball bearing that was used as a ball check valve in the pipeline system of a chemical plant. Sometime later, news broke that another similar sphere had been found. It turned out to be part of a valve used in a paper mill. Over time, other details turned up. An artist from New Mexico collected various kinds of scrap metal to use in creating sculptures. He told reporters that he had once loaded a ball check valve onto the roof of his bus and drove through the Jacksonville area in 1971. A few balls fell out. Perhaps one of them rolled off into the woods where the Betts family found it. That's the whole story. No magic or extraterrestrial technology. But despite all these investigations, the Betts sphere still remained famous. People called the family 24 hours a day. Journalists came to their private property to see the sphere. Of course, the family was tired of such popularity. Telling reporters the same things about this sphere over and over again was not the most fun activity. At some point, the members of the family stopped discussing it. In an interview, Jerry Betts said that all this popularity had suppressed the family. They were no longer engaged in investigations related to the spheres, so the exact origin of this thing was not proven. But as you've already heard, the theories seem to be quite true.
Now, we wouldn't call this island mystical unless there were tales of giants living here. The island of Gozo in Malta is the backdrop of an ancient legend. Malta is an island country located in the Mediterranean Sea, just south of Europe. It's a very strategically located archipelago. Throughout history, it was ruled by many different societies, such as the Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, and Carthaginians. One cold night, thousands of years ago, a farmer noticed the sky turn orange, then red, when he heard a loud thump. Although the ground seemed to be moving, this wasn't an earthquake. When he looked toward the woods, he saw a giant silhouette, taller than the trees. As he fearfully approached, he realized it was a woman, a giant woman. She introduced herself as Sunsuna. Unlike the terrible giants of many tales, Sunsuna didn't want to exterminate the human race. She was loving and caring. She told the farmer that she and her people could help protect their land from invaders. The locals were pretty interested in this offer. Since Malta is located in an important commercial route, it was constantly being invaded. The story says that Sunsuna settled in Malta, and sooner rather than later, she was moving things around. And when I say things, I mean monoliths. Sunsuna carried huge stones on her shoulder to build a magnificent temple called Gigantia, which means place of giants. She even did this while holding her half-giant, half-human kid on the other shoulder. Some say Sunsuna lived exclusively on beans and honey, although others replaced honey with water. The funniest bit here is that Malta is the 10th smallest country in the world. but it somehow managed to host giants. Hey, go figure. The temple looked like a giant game of Tetris, with some stones weighing as much as 20 elephants. Some of these monolithic rocks are so heavy, scholars guess it would take 50 men working together to lift just one stone. Now, as much as this is entertaining, humans never proved giants were real, so this story couldn't be true. There's a brief mention of a species of giants called the Nephilim in some ancient texts. The Nephilims would have been terrible giants that wreaked havoc on the earth and only survived until the Great Flood. But nobody ever found real proof of this species really existing on Earth, until this came along. The world of Maltese archaeology unearthed quite a few shocking things in the past years. One of them are known as the hypogeum skulls. Hypogeum is the Greek word for underground, and this incredible site was discovered in the first decade of the 20th century. Back then, Malta's National Museum director received an important phone call. Someone had accidentally dug some impressive bones and asked him to come check it out. The hypogeum looked like an underground city, filled with mazes and rooms that stretched along multiple floors. They were all made with similar limestones as the Maltese temples above ground. The hypogeum was filled with important relics and artifacts. Scientists quickly understood that the hypogeum was built as a type of final resting place for locals. So, along with skulls, they found a lot of bones and skeletons. One of these artifacts were skulls, but these weren't regular human skulls. Rather, they were of the elongated type. To make matters worse, these skulls were hidden from the public for years. People started to talk and created a bunch of theories behind it. The truth is that this discovery was a turning point for Maltese archaeology, although scientists didn't know what to do with it. Some wondered if these skulls were natural or manipulated, since they knew some cultures in the world used head binds to alter their skulls. Other scientists threw in the hypothesis of little gray people or even the legendary giants. Some say that the elongated skulls could have been sculptures that worshipped otherworldly deities. There was no way to confirm any of these theories, so the question remained: who were the builders of Malta's megalithic temples? Now let's take a look at what scientists know. The Maltese megalithic temples have been standing strong since 3500 BCE, which is even older than the pyramids of Egypt. The main dilemma here is that these temples were built even before we invented writing, yet they required advanced technological skills to exist. The Gigantea Temple seems too absurd to have been built by humans. The South Temple has a corridor with 4 oval rooms on the sides, looking like a big shamrock leaf. In one of these rooms, scientists found altars decorated with spiral patterns. It looked like an altar of some sort, indicating early Maltese people used them for ritualistic purposes. The North Temple is similar but smaller, with a very low entrance that makes people crouch down to get inside. You get it? You need to bow down to their deities in order to get into this sacred place. I mean, one can't help but wonder about the secret reasons these ancient builders had to build such a huge temple. I'm thinking they probably cast one of Daenerys' dragons to move the monoliths around. Yeah, I'm joking here. But hey, remember the entrance to King's Landing? Yup, the series used the Medina Gates in Malta as the exterior of King's Landing during Episode 3 of Season 1. Anyways, back to the giants. The ritualistic theory of the whole thing won a few points when archaeologists uncovered these mysterious figures. They're popularly known as fat ladies. These tiny statues have round bodies and faces that show how much they enjoyed life. They kind of look like a miniature Sunzana, the giantess we talked about. Scientists believe these were statues that celebrated well-being and prosperity. It does prove that the people of the time had advanced craftsmanship skills, and they were pretty intentional with their constructions and art manifestations. One of these statues is known as the Sleeping Lady. This Neolithic piece of art depicts the figure of a large woman lying on her side sleeping. After studying it deeper, scientists guessed this statue was meant to represent the Great Reaper. It was found in the hypogeum, which we now know is a huge resting place. This specific statue is different from all the other fat ladies, starting with the hair and the embroidered skirt. Then there's this statue. This is supposed to represent an 8-foot-tall woman and the rim of her skirt. She was discovered in the most unusual of ways. A farmer was trying to plow his field, but he kept hitting large blocks of stone. All the way back in 1915, the farmer called Malta's National Museum director and asked him to come check it out. Some think this is all the proof you need to confirm that Sansana was real. Others aren't all that sure. But that's not all. The place where this giant statue was buried revealed one of Malta's most impressive archaeological sites, the Tarsian temples. The temples were made from limestone blocks. Some are 20 feet tall and weigh around 20 tons. Zamet, the museum director, kept digging and discovered multiple sites made of megalithic stones. All of them supposedly built by Stone Age farmers, all stranded on a remote island in the Mediterranean Sea thousands of years ago. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, look at these temples in Manidra. This is probably the world's earliest calendar. On the equinoxes, the sun passes directly through the main doorway, straight down the central axis. On the solstices, there are two superb variations. During the summer solstice, the rays fall on the edge of the megalith to the left of the doorway, and during the winter, the rays fall to the right side of the doorway. It's astronomical precision at its finest. And what about the structures in the Hall Tarsian that we've already talked about? This complex is the oldest one in all of Malta. It was built with the purpose of doing animal offerings to deities. Scientists confirmed this by unearthing numerous animal bones buried in the soil. They also found a great collection of spirals, indicating that the locals also used this temple for ritualistic purposes. Overall, there are 7 megalithic temples in Malta, each more impressive than the other. Scholars keep on digging to see if they can uncover the truth, much like researchers do with the pyramids of Egypt, the lost Mayan cities in the Americas, and other sites.
Imagine you are walking to your car in the morning, but there is a problem. Your vehicle is not sitting neatly by the side of the road. Its rear end is sticking out of a gaping hole. This is what happened to a Queens resident, New York, back in 2020. A sinkhole had swallowed his SUV overnight. Events like this are nothing out of the ordinary in many parts of the globe. But sometimes, sinkholes can hide unspoken beauty inside them. In East Asia, a recent find stunned the scientific community. Cave explorers came across a colossal sinkhole that concealed an ancient forest. It is located in a province, Guangxi Zhuang, close to the north of Vietnam, the Lê County, where researchers discovered the hidden forest is already famous worldwide for sinkholes. This one brings the number to 30. They are scattered over an area the size of 3 Gibraltars. This is just a tenth of the total number of sinkholes in the whole country. The name Tiankeng for these large holes in Earth's surface translates as sky holes or heavenly pits. The dimensions of the new sinkhole are impressive. It is over 1,000 feet long, and it's pretty deep too. You could fit the Great Pyramid of Giza 1.5 times inside it. The sinkhole's total volume matches that of 2,000 Olympic swimming pools. The exploration team had to hike for hours to reach the bottom. It was all worth it in the end. They discovered a pristine underground forest that had no trace of human activity. Scientists estimate that the plants date back to the time of the dinosaurs. The foliage reached to the explorers' shoulders. Some trees were 2 times taller than the Hollywood sign. This discovery was amazing, but not entirely unexpected. Geologists were familiar with this type of landscape. In this part of East Asia, karst topography is pretty common. The word is Slavic in origin. Since the late 19th century, geologists have been using it to describe barren limestone regions. This type of landscape features fissures in the ground, caves, underground streams, and, of course, sinkholes. Karst forms in parts of the world with heavy rainfall. The water dissolves materials such as limestone or dolomite. This creates a scenery that many people describe as wild beauty. Karst terrains have a practical purpose as well. They are ideal for storing water that humans can drink. Around 700 million people around the world use these karst aquifers as their primary water source. In the United States alone, 40% of the groundwater used for drinking comes from them. Springs of Florida and the Mammoth Cave in Kentucky are just some of the most famous karst areas. Geologists classify around a fifth of the U.S. land surface as karst. This type of terrain exists on other continents as well, in the Caribbean, Europe, Australia, and Asia. Due to local differences in climate and geology, karst doesn't appear the same everywhere. In the Spanish province of Malaga, the landscape consists of barren rock. This is what the karst regions of Italy, Slovenia, and Montenegro also look like. In East Asia, the landscape over the karst is green. This is because of the humid tropical climate. Sinkholes and cave entrances are usually hidden behind lush vegetation. The region's unique appearance got it inscribed on the UNESCO's World Heritage List in 2007. The world's second most populous country is home to 2/3 of the planet's natural occurring sinkholes, tiankengs. They start to form when rainwater seeps into cracks in the limestone. Over time, the gaps widen as more and more material is washed away. At one point, the ground above the limestone becomes unstable. The end result is the collapse of the surface layer. This happens suddenly and without prior warning signs. Once a hole forms in the ground, water starts filling it up. Another way for a sinkhole to form is the existence of an underground cave. Its roof can collapse. The shape of such sinkholes resembles a funnel. It is wider at the opening on the top and narrower near the bottom of the pool. The most famous of these sinkholes are cenotes. They occur naturally on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The region is home to more than 2,000 cenotes. They are all former caves whose roofs had collapsed at some point in time, and they are filled with fresh water. The local people have been using them as water sources for thousands of years. The ancient Mayas gave them mystical symbolism. For them, the cenotes were passageways to the other world. In reality, they are just a feature of karst terrain. Sinkholes that form in regions with abundant rainfall and limestone beneath the surface soil. The depth of a sinkhole can vary significantly. The smallest are barely 3 feet deep. When it fills up with water, it turns into a pond. A large lake can form in the place of a large sinkhole. One example is the Red Lake in Croatia. The most impressive thing about it are the steep cliffs that rise above the lake. They are nearly 800 feet tall. The world's biggest and deepest sinkhole, Xiaoshai Tiankeng, lies in the vicinity of the Yangtze River. The outside world discovered it only in 1994. The hole is so deep that you could stack up 7 statues of liberty inside it. During the rainy season, a waterfall cascades from the pit's mouth into a cave system at the bottom. But not all sinkholes fill up with water. This was the case with the newly discovered giant sinkhole in Asia. It developed its own ecosystem. The high humidity and low temperature inside it were perfect for plant life to thrive. The very bottom of the hole is connected to an underground water flow. Scientists discovered 72 species of rare wild plants in the area. They are in danger of disappearing on the surface. But inside the sinkhole, they have found the perfect conditions for growth. The enormous opening in the ground is essentially a wildlife refuge. This was confirmed in 2021. That's when biologists discovered 2 species in the Yunnan province that they previously thought had gone extinct. Who knows what other animal and plant species are still hiding in there? Exploring these underground cave systems can be quite dangerous. They are often home to venomous snakes and mosquitoes. Even descending into a sinkhole is perilous. The cliffs are steep and stones are often very sharp. That's why the exploration of sinkholes in Asia is going slower than research would like. The sinkholes I've mentioned so far have all formed naturally. Erosion is the main process behind their creation. But the ground can also open because of human activity. Everything from a construction site to a leaking sewer pipe can cause the earth to give way. Sinkholes in urban areas pose a risk to infrastructure. One of the most famous examples of this happened in Japan in 2016. A busy street in downtown Fukuoka collapsed near the main train station. The sinkhole severed power lines and pipes that lay underground. Luckily, no one was injured. The diligent Japanese engineers repaired the damaged road section in just 48 hours. The biggest issue with sinkholes is that you never know when and where they are going to open. The best tool that geologists have for detecting underground cavities is ground-penetrating radar, GPR. It resembles a land mower. The operator goes up and down a troubled area to scan the ground underneath. The radar sends out impulses that detect any contrast between different materials. It feeds back this info in the form of a 2D or a 3D image. Once engineers detect a potential sinkhole, they use different techniques to stabilize the ground above it. The simplest method is called grouting. It involves filling the hole so it won't collapse. The most common materials are polyurethane foam and cement. The alternative is to lift a structure above the sinkhole. This technique is called underpinning. Workers drive steel rods into the load-bearing deeper layer of soil. This is the same construction method engineers use to erect stilt houses above the waterline.
Imagine you've booked a tour through the jungles of Costa Rica. All of a sudden, you stumble upon a huge stone sphere, nearly the length of a king-sized bed in diameter. How on earth did it end up there? And what does it symbolize? You immediately ask your guide. He's not as amazed as you are, and tells you that there are actually several hundreds of them scattered across the south of the country. The mysterious stone spheres don't have an official name. The locals simply call them las bolas, which means balls in Spanish, while historians refer to them as Diquis spheres, after the culture that produced them. Scientists have studied the sediment layers of the earth around them and estimate that the earliest were made around the year 600 CE, and the newest ones date to the year 1000 CE. Many of the spheres were relocated after their initial discovery, and that's why archaeologists can't date them precisely. The Diquis culture completely disappeared shortly after they were discovered by the Spanish in the 16th century. Unlike the Mayas and the Aztecs, the myths or legends of these peoples didn't survive, so they cannot explain the existence of the mysterious orbs. More than 300 of these objects have been discovered so far, with some being smaller than 1 inch in diameter, and the largest measures 6.6 feet in diameter, standing taller than most humans. Although there are ones made from limestone, most spheres were carved out of a coarse version of basalt, a type of rock that forms when lava cools rapidly. Some orbs weigh up to 15 tons, and in most cases, their surface is smooth to the touch, although there are coarse, mostly unfinished pieces. If we throw away the theory that river erosion naturally sculpted the spheres, the ancient people seem to have created them by hammering boulders with other rocks. Once they got the rough shape they were aiming for, they would polish the rock to perfection, using techniques such as controlled fracture and grinding. The mysterious spheres are located in the Diquis Delta, on the coast of the Pacific Ocean. Most of them can be found in a place called Farm 6, which, alongside 3 other sites, was proclaimed a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2014. The area contains other finds from the pre-Columbian era, such as paved areas, burial sites, and mounds. For centuries, the stone balls were hidden under a thick layer of sediment that protected them against the elements and looters, until they were unearthed during the 1930s. The company that owned the land was clearing the rainforest for banana plantations when they stumbled upon these unusual stone constructions. Some were damaged by bulldozers, and some by workers trying to pry them open, as they believed there was gold hidden inside. It took a while before the authorities intervened to stop further damage to the finds. Doris Stone, the daughter of an executive of the company that owned the land, was the first to study the spheres. In 1943, she published an article in a leading American archaeological journal, turning the world's attention to the orbs. Expeditions soon followed, and archaeologists were immediately able to determine that the stone formations were human-made, probably created by the ancient indigenous population of Costa Rica. To this day, no one has been able to fully explain their function in a scientific way. It means there's still room for some wild theories about the sphere's origins and true purpose. The most popular theory in the scientific community is that the stone spheres served as decorations and status symbols, as many of them were found near the houses of chieftains. Local tribal leaders were also laid to rest with some of the smaller balls, so these stone formations were definitely associated with power in some way. Chiseling a boulder to perfection involved a lot of labor and planning, and only powerful individuals could afford it at the time. The other popular theory is that the boulders were used for astronomical observations. Individual spheres represented stars or planets, like a primitive map of the night sky. Since they were perfectly round, it was easy to roll them around. Before the jungle engulfed them, the area where they were found was a flat alluvial plain, ideal for rolling large boulders around. Another version of this theory suggests that the stones were used as boundary markers, much like modern border stones, which are also mostly made from stone. Finally, legends from other tribes that lived in the area tell of how the spheres were cannonballs that the deity of thunder used to drive away the deity of winds and hurricanes. We still don't know the original purpose of the Costa Rican spheres, but they remain an important part of the country's national identity. The National Museum in the Costa Rican capital, San Jose, has 6 of them in its courtyard. Many other spheres have become prized garden decorations for wealthy Costa Ricans. There's even one at Harvard University. More than a millennium after they were created, the mysterious stone spheres of Costa Rica are still associated with power and wealth. In terms of numbers, the stone orbs are not perfectly round. They are rated as nearly perfect, at 96% spherical in shape. And while even that is pretty impressive, the spheres of Costa Rica are not the only ones of their kind. Nearly a decade ago, workers came across mysterious giant stone spheres deep underground in a coal mine in northern Asia. The surface of the spheres, which measured a little over the length of a human footstep in diameter, was unusually smooth, and people tried to explain it somehow. Some were certain they were out of this world, and others suggested the spheres were actually petrified dinosaur eggs. Scientists quickly put an end to further discussion, as it turned out that the mysterious spheres were concretions. Those are rock formations that take millions of years to form deep underground. Think of a pebble that picks up snow as it rolls down a hill. That's how concretions are made. Groundwater, rich in sediment and minerals, flows around the sediment, slowly shaping it into a perfect orb. The process is quite common in nature, but most concretions are fairly small. The spheres found in the coal mine grew to their size in the mineral-rich ground, and they were big enough to get the press and the general public interested. Another possible case of concretions is the massive stone spheres found in the Visoko Valley in Bosnia. Samir Osmanagic, better known as the Bosnian Indiana Jones, was the first to explore those objects about as wide as the length of a London bus. He believes the stone spheres were carved by a lost civilization that lived in the area 1,000 years ago. The reddish color of the orbs, though, is proof to geologists that they are indeed concretions, rich in iron content. The Moki marbles, found in rural Utah, are similar in color to the Bosnian spheres. These tiny concretions are the size of toy marbles and consist of a sandstone core and a shell made out of hematite, an iron ore. In South Africa, miners have come across Klerksdorp spheres, which are similar in shape and size to Moki marbles. The only difference is that these ones formed inside volcanic sediments and ash. The most intriguing among human-made tiny spheres are probably the orbs found on several Greek islands. Scientists discovered 700 stones smaller than golf balls near the Bronze Age site of Akrotiri on the island of Santorini. They believed that the finds were between 3,600 and 4,500 years old. When they compared all the stone's variations in size and color, the archaeologists concluded that these enigmatic stones could have easily been the oldest board game ever made. With the help of artificial intelligence, scientists are now trying to work out the rules of this game.
So people have tried to make up stories about weird-looking humans for as long as we can remember. What's even weirder is that, over the years, people have even claimed to have proof of these mythical humanoids. Like the Gorgadas, which were said to be a tribe that lived on islands near the Atlantic coast of Africa. The first time these people were mentioned in any sort of literature goes back to the 1st century. Not much was said about the gentlemen of the tribe, but the ladies sure were special. The women of this tribe were said to have hair all over their bodies. These days, scientists are almost certain people might have confused these humanoids with monkeys or apes. One Carthaginian general claimed he actually visited the islands back in the day and described the men as apparently being really fast runners. This strengthens the idea that these reports were of primates, not of people. It's normal to assume apes or monkeys would have bolted after seeing people for the first time, right? The location of the Gorgadas and their native islands is uncertain and has been described in different ways by writers over time. Pliny the Elder, a Roman scholar from the 1st century, wrote about another strange tribe. These people were called the Astami. Similar to the Gorgadas, they were said to be hairy people that lived in the upper parts of the Ganges River, near today's North Indian border. It was not their appearance that made them weird, though. Pliny wrote that these creatures didn't eat or drink at all, not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't have mouths. They got their nourishment from sniffing the scent of plants and apples. A strong scent could also have been very dangerous to them. As for their overall build, they were said to be thin and bony, mostly because they didn't consume any food. It's hard to believe these people did exist at some point, but there may be some historical facts to back this mysterious sniffing behavior. Some specialists believe that tribes located near the Himalayan mountains brought fragrant fruits and veggies on their travels. That's because smelling something nice can help with altitude sickness. In the past, travelers thought the nausea was caused by a bad wind and tried to cope by smelling onions, dried apples, apricots, and garlic. Now, Pliny the Elder seems to have had a lot of fun writing about strange human-like species. In his writing, he also mentions a tribe of headless people, with their faces on their chests. They were popular in medieval tales too, and were also nicknamed chest eyes. They were said to live in mountainous and wooded areas of North Africa, surrounded by wild animals such as lions, elephants, and snakes. Herodotus, the Greek writer from the 5th century BCE, also mentions these people in his story, but since he is known as both the father of history and the father of lies, I wouldn't be so quick to believe his stories. As with many other myths surrounding mythical creatures, there is some truth to these descriptions. People that travel through the desert, like the Tuareg people, traditionally wear clothing that covers them completely, with spaces in the fabric just for their eyes and nose. It's because of this tradition where they believe it protects them from spirits while they're crossing the desert. It's no wonder these outfits might have misled the ancient writers into thinking these people were headless. This next mythical group was like the basset hounds of people, not because they had a good sense of smell or because they snored on the couch the whole day, but because they had ears so long they could cover their entire bodies at night. They were called the Panati, and were said to be a tribe of giant-eared people from some unknown cold islands. They slept inside their big ears, and some said they could even help these people fly. Then there are the stories about weird monopods. You might have already guessed what those looked like. The monopods were creatures in ancient mythology that had just one big foot. The word monopod translates to 1 foot in Greek. They were also called sciopod, which means shadow foot. That's because, according to some accounts, these people had feet so large they could use them as umbrellas to help them hide from the sun. They would simply lay on their backs with their foot up in case they were ever caught in the scorching heat. Never mind about the foot burn. They were first mentioned in a play in 414 BCE. Others wrote about traveler stories encountering monopods in India, and they described these people as having one leg, but one they could easily leap with to get around. No list of strange human-like creatures would be complete without mermaids. They're described as mythical beings who live in the sea and are usually depicted as having a woman's upper body and a fish's tail below the waist. In different cultures, the mermaid represents either life and fertility or danger and destruction. The earliest known mermaid legend dates back to around 1000 BCE. In this story, the spirit, Archaeologists, wanted to live in the sea, but her peers would not allow her to give up on her beautiful features. So they opted for that half-human, half-fish appearance. There are also folktales of mermaids in early Britain, but with no illustrations attached. In sailor tales, the mermaids can symbolize both luck and tragedy. Since sailors spent much time in the sea and they sometimes had nothing to do, it's no wonder they started to believe in figures that controlled the weather. Mermaids were seen as both attractive and dangerous, like the sea itself, reflecting the unpredictable and thrilling nature of water. We have no proof that mermaids exist today, but some people did their best to manufacture evidence over the years. Ever heard of the Fiji mermaid? It was a made-up creature introduced by American showman P.T. Barnum back in the 1840s. It was presented in New York, Boston, and London and gathered a lot of attention from the public. It was not the only one of its kind, and the weird thing is these fake mermaids weren't even pretty. Some of them were made by attaching fishtails to ape or monkey bones. The Dominican Republic has its own mysterious human-like mythological creature. This story tells of a woman who lives in the woods, described as having long dark hair. But here comes the catch: she's said to have backward feet. Despite being quite short, her features are described as being extremely beautiful, especially her eyes. Her name is La Ciguapa. She's thought to be a nocturnal creature, and you can't predict her movements based on her footprints, because of the way her feet are positioned. It's also thought that to catch sight of her, you'll need to go looking for her at night, but only when there's a full moon. There's always a catch. And you'll also need a dog to help. There are many variations of her story, though. Other tales speak of a shy creature that runs away at the mere sight of humans. She's known to sleep in trees and feed on fish and fruit. Now, you'll mostly hear about dwarves in Norse mythology. In many Northern European tales, dwarves are described as being physically smaller than most people, but also as the best of blacksmiths. They were responsible for manufacturing powerful tools that helped many heroes in their quest. Some dwarves also possessed shape-shifting abilities. They frequently took on the appearance of inanimate items like needles, as well as creatures like fish and otters. These dwarf stories may have some historical facts to back them up, too. Back in the Bronze Age, miners located in southern Europe slowly ran out of tin, a material needed to make bronze. As they went searching for more supplies, they moved northwest, where more tin was available. These miners were shorter than most Northern Europeans, and their features included darker skin and bushier hair and beards. To top it all off, they had way better knowledge of metals and how to mine and use them to make necessary tools. It's no wonder that they might have really impressed the guests to the point they believed those miners were magic.
Dinosaurs, big ancient bugs, creepy spiders, and scary insects are all cute animals compared to the monsters that lived on Earth about 500 million years ago. For example, here's a creature that swam in the water like a stingray and had 3 eyes. Its mouth was like a pencil sharpener. 2 long claws with forked tips like pincers protruded from its head, and its gills were somewhere in the back. This is not a thing from a sci-fi movie. This is Mosaura. Its remains are preserved in excellent condition. Let's look at it more closely and study other similar monsters. The Cambrian Explosion. Remember this name. This period is also called the Biological Big Bang, the time when a huge number of different living creatures began to appear in the ocean, large, small, and tiny. The ancestors of almost all modern animal groups were most likely born during the Cambrian Explosion, which lasted from 541 to 485 million years ago. It was a time when the first truly effective and terrifying predators appeared on Earth. One of them was Mosaura. It's only the size of an index finger, but you would never want to meet such a creature while swimming in the sea. It's scary to imagine what it could do with its pencil sharpener-shaped mouth. And you probably wouldn't be able to hide from it because, come on, it had 2 eyes on the sides and 1 big eye on its forehead. Mosura belonged to a group of arthropods. Scientists called it a sea moth since it reminded them of a moth. This thing used a flap-like apparatus similar to wings to float in the water like a stingray. This monster was quite creepy, but its appearance may seem familiar because it's a distant relative of modern spiders, crabs, centipedes, and moths. Scientists found several 506 million-year-old Mosura fossils, but unlike many other similar finds, these ones have been preserved in excellent condition. The found fossils showed sharp claws, a toothy jaw, and large gills in the tail section. Some parts of the fossil were so clear that they revealed the details of the creature's internal anatomy, including parts of its nervous and circulatory systems and digestive tract. It had jointed limbs like those of modern insects and crustaceans. When this monster swam in the sea, it probably grabbed its prey with long spiked claws sticking out of its head. Many Mosura relatives have claws covered with multiple spikes, which help them grab food. But that ancient creature had smooth claws forked at the tips. That is, it grabbed the prey with those tongs, using them like chopsticks, and then brought it to its mouth. Of course, this is an assumption, and nobody saw how this creature actually did it. Unlike many other similar animals, Mosura's posterior segmented body was studded with gills. Scientists don't know why this was necessary, but they assume that such an unusual breathing system helped to adapt to an environment with low oxygen content. Perhaps Mosura led a very active reproductive lifestyle that required high oxygen consumption. Creepy, dangerous, and reproducing fast. An excellent set of qualities for one of the most dangerous predators of antiquity. But what did Mosura eat? It probably caught different types of worms and small arthropods. It's nice to think that this monster lived so long ago and was so small. But what if this creature was the size of a shark and was swimming in the ocean these days? Perhaps it would become a dominant dweller and people would swim much less along the coast. Mosura lived in the water but was discovered in the Burgess Shale rock formation in the Canadian Rockies. Many mountains on Earth were once the seabed inhabited by strange creatures. One of them was Opabinia. It had 5 eyes, a mouth facing backward, a long trunk and claws instead of a nose. Wait, what? It's too strange even for science fiction, even for outer space. In its eccentricity, Opabinia was perhaps the loneliest creature on Earth. Scientists couldn't find another species that would be similar to this individual until recently. Meet Utaurora. It seems to belong to the same species as Opabinia. Its inch-long body was divided into 14 to 15 furrows. Each of them ended in a pointed flap. Opabinia had the same body, but it's unlikely that both monsters were friends. The difference between their timelines was several million years. It's hard to imagine why these monsters needed such strange body structures. Why haven't modern filmmakers used the design of those animals to create cool space monsters yet? Okay, they were creepy creatures, but what about weird and kinda useless ones? Scientists have discovered Su, a legless creature with no head turned inside out. Huh? This 444 million-year-old creature was found in South Africa, north of Cape Town. They called it Su after the discoverer's mother. In fact, it's some kind of new arthropod species that may have lived in low-oxygen waters. This creature was turned inside out, and the outer shell with the legs and head was lost. Thanks to mineralization, muscles, tendons, and even Su's intestines were preserved on the fossil. It's a great success to find such detailed remains of an ancient creature. However, scientists still can't determine the evolutionary history of this species. They're sure that it was a primitive marine arthropod. Okay, we can see that 500 million years ago, Earth was filled with creepy monsters, which fortunately are now extinct. But what about trees? Were they the same as we see now? Or was there something else? Something creepy? Oh yeah. Scientists have discovered a new kind of living organism similar to a tree or a mushroom. It was gigantic and had a very minimalistic design. Meet the Prototaxites. It's basically just a big stick with a round end poking out of the ground. It was smooth, didn't have the usual tree bark, and looked more like a mushroom without a cap. But scientists have recently found out that it wasn't a mushroom at all. Prototaxites probably belonged to a previously unknown branch of life. Prototaxites is considered to be the first giant organism in the history of the planet that lived on land. It existed about 420 to 375 million years ago during the Devonian period. It was the time when plants began to spread across dry land, forming large forests. Over time, they began to grow leaves and form roots in the ground. Then, the first seed plants appeared. The real colonization of land began. The first arthropods, such as centipedes, arachnids, and other unpleasant creatures, began to walk among those forests. Meanwhile, the water was filled with a huge biodiversity. There was a giant supercontinent on the planet, and smaller parts began to break off it. During this period, Prototaxites towered over the land. Some of these things reached 26 feet high and 3 feet wide. It's like a 3-story house and as thick as a palm tree. But what was it? A plant? A mushroom? Algae, perhaps? Scientists discovered them in the middle of the 19th century, but only in 2007 did they conduct chemical analysis. Research showed that it was most likely a giant mushroom, but in 2025, scientists refuted this conclusion. It turns out this may have been an unknown life form that existed separately from the kingdom of fungi, animals, plants, and protists. Scientists noticed that the inner part of Prototaxites consisted of a number of tubes. There are similar tubes inside mushrooms, but the tubes of that ancient living thing branched and joined differently. They even had a different chemical composition. The main building block of mushrooms is chitin, but the Prototaxites contained chemicals similar to lignin, a substance found in the bark of trees and other plants, and its anatomy differs from the structure of any other organism known to us. What were they doing on Earth? Just chilled and enjoyed the bloom of life? Did they produce some kind of fruit, like a banana with eyes and claws? Scientists don't know. What if it was something that was brought to Earth from outer space? What if they were flowers planted by another civilization? What do you think? You decided to go scuba diving for the first time. The water is clear and the sun is shining on the seabed. You take a few selfies and the fish swimming by when suddenly, the ocean goes pitch black. You look up and, oh my, what is that gigantic animal? It's definitely not a shark, not a whale. Is it a turtle? Yup, but fear not, it's not gonna hurt you. If you had lived on this same Earth about 72 million years ago, then maybe this could have really happened to you. Scientists have recently found the fossils of a gigantic marine turtle that could have grown as big as 12 feet. If you don't have any idea of how big that is, let's see some examples. That's the average length of a hippopotamus, 6 golden retrievers, or 2 Michael Jordans stacked on top of each other. The turtle's scientific name is an homage to that old-school sea monster called Leviathan. Maybe you remember this from old-school history lessons. The Leviathan is supposedly a mythical creature that would swallow entire ships or people that were deemed too greedy by the creature. Can you imagine being swallowed by this humongous sea turtle? No, thank you. The fossils of this gigantic creature began to be excavated between 2016 and 2021, all the way in northeastern Spain. The first fossil was located by a hiker in the Spanish Pyrenees, and it was around 8 inches long. The pelvis of this turtle alone measured around 35 inches. It would definitely be one of the biggest turtles today if it hadn't gone extinct. FYI, the largest living sea turtles today can reach up to 6 feet in length. which is already pretty big. Now, how about a gigantic prehistoric scorpion? I bet most people here are not huge fans of these creatures, especially since they're poisonous, which is why the thought of a 9-foot-long aquatic scorpion might be the stuff of nightmares. Let's just say that if they hadn't gone extinct some 400 million years ago, lakes and rivers would be much more dangerous places for humans today. These gigantic insects were considered to be apex predators in their time, hunting everything from fish to other animals, even of their own kind. Yikes! I got goosebumps just imagining these creatures. Should we thank the asteroid that hit our planet now or later on in this video? Another prehistoric animal that would shock humans if it were still alive is the so-called Megatherium, a gigantic sloth. This huge sloth is believed to have grown up to 20 feet long, and its weight could be up to 8,000 pounds. It was found in the woodlands and grasslands of South America. The creature used to stand on its 2 feet in order to reach leaves on high branches. These giant sloths had huge claws. They helped them climb trees. I gotta say, I feel uncomfortable imagining these elephant-sized sloths climbing trees. Oh, of course, some dinosaurs will make our super-sized creatures list. But before that, here's a fun fact. Did you know some dinosaurs are still alive today? Scientists have proven that birds are classified as theropod dinosaurs. Such infamous creatures as the T-Rex and Velociraptor belonged to this group. I'm sure you've heard these names even before you watched Jurassic Park. The Velociraptor is that scary dino that breaks into the kitchen. Well, they evolved, gained some feathers, and turned into various species of birds we know today. That means that any bird from chickens to those little blue ones is a direct descendant of dinosaurs. Now, does the name Spinosaurus ring a bell? You can see this huge dinosaur in some museums today. Its fossils, I mean. The Spinosaurus was one of the biggest land predators to walk Earth. Actually, to walk its land and water, since scientists believe that this dino was semi-aquatic. It fed mostly on meat, which means humans would be its natural prey if it lived today. This meat-eating dino lived around 90 to 100 million years ago. It was about 60 feet long, 12 feet high, and weighed up to 22 tons. Its head was around the size of 8 bowling balls and was shaped like a crocodile's face. Basically, the Spinosaurus was a big African elephant with the face of a crocodile. Just kidding. But that would look funny though, wouldn't it? A much more attractive dino was this guy. It's considered to be the largest dinosaur that has ever lived on our planet. What made it so big was its extremely long neck and very long tail. You wouldn't want to stand behind this creature, believe me. If it decided to swish its tail, you'd get catapulted very far away. This creature lived around 100 million years ago, and its fossils were first found in Argentina around 2012. The dino measured 120 feet from head to tail, which made it almost as big as an American football field in width. And have I mentioned it weighed almost as much as a space shuttle? A staggering 75 tons. If it had been a carnivore, it would have probably been the greatest predator. But this big guy was a peaceful herbivore that had such a long neck that it could eat leaves from high trees. Cute, right? We must also talk about the Shastasaurus. As the name suggests, this animal is popularly known as the Mount Shasta lizard. Even though it was a marine reptile and probably never set foot on the mountain itself, this dino was usually around 23 feet long, but there was a specific strand of this species that could get as big as 69 feet long, about the size of the great blue whale. This made it the biggest marine reptile to have ever lived. A fun fact about the Shastasaurus is that scientists believe it didn't even have teeth, which means it could only feed on soft-bodied prey, such as squid, for example. The next animal on our list is the blue whale. Believe it or not, the biggest living animal on Earth actually started small. These days, the average mature blue whale can reach up to 100 feet in length and weigh up to 200 tons. That's more or less the weight of 40 elephants put together, or 30 Tyrannosaurus rexes, or 2,670 average-sized people. Blue whales have to eat up to 50 million calories per day to support that body. That's the equivalent of 30,000 Big Macs, just FYI. But blue whales weren't always this big. They actually evolved from a four-legged mammal that lived on Earth around 48 million years ago. Their ancestor was called Pachycetus, and it was only 6 feet long. Here's a fun fact. To be able to live in the water as one does today, the blue whale had to go through some intense adaptations. A blue whale can replace up to 80 to 90% of oxygen in its lungs each time it takes a breath. A human replaces only up to 15% for comparison. It allows these animals to dive for up to 1 hour at a time, down to a staggering depth of 330 feet. Elephants were bound to make the list. Elephants are currently the largest land animals on Earth. They can grow to be about 13 feet tall and weigh up to 7 tons. That's pretty small if we compare it to the other animals that once lived on Earth, right? But if we placed a 6-foot-tall human next to an elephant, we'll see it's not at all that small. African elephants are bigger than their close relatives, Asian elephants, and they have a similar lifespan to humans, up to 70 years. Pokemon might have made us collectively wish that salamanders were real-life dragons, although they're not. They can still be pretty cool, though. There's a giant species of salamander that is known to be the largest living amphibian. They can grow to be as long as a regular-sized human, reaching up to 6 feet. I bet that wouldn't be a pleasant underwater encounter. We've all been afraid of the dark at some point in our lives, haven't we? I mean, do you remember getting tucked into bed by your mom or dad after they read you some scary fairy tale with monsters and dragons, or even dinosaurs? But just as your parents were about to turn the lights off and silently step out of your room, you remembered. What if there was something hiding under your bed? Or worse, what if some spooky creature was stuck somewhere in the closet? You could probably get up and check, but it was too dark out there. Wouldn't it be great to have some source of light that would come from within your body? You could always use it whenever you get surrounded by darkness. Unfortunately, as humans, we aren't able to do that. But there are a bunch of creatures out there that can, in fact, light themselves up. That's thanks to a little something scientists call bioluminescence. Animals and fish living in the ocean tend to have this talent more often than others. And you can find these creatures anywhere, close to the surface or deep down at the bottom. 2.5 miles deep if you have a knack for numbers. These creatures use their light for a lot of things, like communicating with other members of their species, luring in prey, and even scaring away enemies. Bioluminescence is basically an organism's ability to emit its own light. Chemistry has a lot to do with it. Such animals use two chemicals, one called luciferin and the other called luciferase. Add a bit of oxygen and bam! Light! Should you ever wonder if you actually observe bioluminescence or if someone just dropped a glow stick in the ocean, be on the lookout for neon blue, green, or even red sparkles in the sea. They're usually spread over a large area. This can even make the water look like glitter or a starry sky. You can thank squid, tiny crustaceans, and algae for this romantic atmosphere. Now, I've got another unusual phenomenon for you. How about a golden waterfall? I'm not kidding, it actually exists, and it's a natural phenomenon. To see it, you have to drive to Yosemite National Park to the Horsetail Fall. Make sure to plan your trip in winter or early spring. That's the only time during the year when you can see this awesome phenomenon. It doesn't need any scientific explanation. It's nothing more than sunlight at dusk hitting the waterfall in such a unique way that it makes it look like a river of lava. Or gold, your choice. That's the reason why during this time of year, the Horsetail Fall is also named the Fire Fall. Unfortunately, this phenomenon is becoming less and less visible within the years, mostly because of drought and other issues connecting with the melting of snow. So, should you ever decide to visit, keep an eye on the waterfall since the effect is very brief. Ever heard of a dirty thunderstorm? It's also called volcanic lightning. Apparently, specialists looking into the phenomenon have yet to fully grasp what it is. When a regular thunderstorm happens, particles with positive and negative charges collide, hence the giant spark we call lightning. It also makes a lot of noise, which you can recognize as thunder. But when a volcano is erupting, some of the volcanic ash particles get electrically charged, and while getting projected into the air with a huge force, they collide and cause electrical discharges. This whole process makes it look like there's lightning coming from the volcano itself. Imagine all that ash, gas, and smoke coming from the crater, and then add some electricity to the mix. It'll make the whole picture look really bizarre. No wonder this phenomenon is called the dirty thunderstorm. Now, how about clouds that look like waves? Those are called asperitas clouds, and they're actually quite close to the ground, unlike your regular day-to-day clouds. The name comes from the word aspero, which in Latin translates to rough or uneven. On rare occasion, you may spot such clouds when the weather is calm, but they're mostly associated with thunderstorms. These clouds appear during unstable atmospheric conditions, and surprisingly, they don't produce rain. Even though they do resemble dark storm-like clouds, they also create random patterns, tricking your eyes into thinking you're looking at the surface of the sea from under the water. Another impressive kind of cloud is called mammatus clouds. What makes them so special is a series of bulges emerging from the base of each cloud. One such cloud enters a level in the atmosphere where the wind direction changes. You can see these wave-like patterns in the sky. Australia is the place for you if you like surfing, but not all the waves you can catch there are made of water. Near a town called Hayden, there's a mysterious wave made out of rocks. This granite formation supposedly dates back to 2.63 billion years ago. That's way before dinosaurs started hanging around the planet. Standing at 49 feet high and 360 feet long, the wave was formed as a result of two processes: weathering and erosion. There's softer sediment at the base of the wave rock, which was chemically weathered by groundwater. Winds and rain did the rest of the job, causing the erosion of the rest of the formation. Its red, yellow, and gray stripes are made of iron hydroxide, carbonates, and other chemical compounds that were washed down by the rain. You've made it to Australia, so stick around a bit more. There's one more location here that seems unreal. You'll need to fly over this one, however, if you want the best picture. In the western part of the country, surrounded by green woodlands, there's a series of lakes. They're all a staggering shade of bright pink. Out of them all, the most famous is Lake Hillier, a 2,000-foot-long reservoir. It's surrounded by both sand and a forest of eucalyptus trees. This makes the cartoon-like hue of the lake stand out even more. One of the many theories explaining the color of these mysterious lakes is connected with algae. These algae appear to gather high levels of a substance called beta-carotene, which has a red-orange pigment in it. Another explanation involves haloarchaea. Those are microorganisms that sometimes look red. Even if you don't enjoy flying, the lakes are great for taking a swim. They're not toxic, even though they have loads of salt in them. This means you'll be able to stay afloat easily, and the water won't damage your swimsuit. During winter up north in Canada, a bizarre phenomenon happens at Lake Abraham in Alberta. Underneath the frozen surface, you can spot some weird objects that look like frozen jellyfish. It's definitely not the case, as these creepy formations are just frozen methane bubbles. Those are pockets of gas that were trapped underwater and got stuck there after the lake had frozen. They appear when leaves and grass fall into the water and bacteria digest them. This process transforms them into methane. This phenomenon is as beautiful and strange as it is dangerous. The pockets of methane can easily become highly flammable. When the temperatures rise during the spring, the ice melts and these bubbles start popping and fizzing. It's a spectacular sight to observe. Picture a lake filled with soda. Remember not to bring any source of fire. It can be very dangerous for visitors. You can check out these types of lakes all across Canada's Banff National Park. Nature often tends to make its own music. Just listen to the sound of crickets at night or the soothing noise of a waterfall. But in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, there's a strange geological phenomenon which takes nature soundtracks to a completely different level. These are called the ringing rocks, and scientists still can't explain their unusual behavior. If you strike these rocks with a heavy object, like a hammer or another rock, the stones will make a ringing sound, as if they were hollow, but they're not. What makes the ringing rocks even more bizarre, apart from the mysterious sound they make, is that no animal wants to hang around there. Even though the rocks are surrounded by a thick forest, scientists haven't managed to trace any animal activity in the area yet. Even more striking is the fact that despite all the trees around the rocks, you won't find any leaves lying on the boulders. What makes these rocks so unappealing for both animals and vegetation is still up for debate. Have you ever visited a famous monument and thought, alright, this is boring? While you were up on the Eiffel Tower yawning at the view, another landmark in Paris was pulling off the ultimate plot twist. Hidden in plain sight at Place de la Concorde stands a 3,300-year-old Egyptian obelisk that's been keeping juicy secrets from Pharaoh Ramses II himself. That's right. Ancient secret messages carved in stone have been right under our noses this whole time. Nope, this isn't the next National Treasure movie. This is real life, and it took a real-life Indiana Jones to crack the code. So, let's set the stage. You've probably seen this block of stone before, right? Towering 75 feet high, this massive granite pillar was originally from Luxor, Egypt, and it's been chilling in the heart of Paris since 1836. It's covered in hieroglyphs, and for years, everyone assumed we'd already cracked their code. Mystery solved. Nothing left to see here. Enter Jean-Guillaume Olet-Pelletier, French Egyptologist, cryptology expert, and part-time monument whisperer. Basically, if Indiana Jones traded his whip for reading glasses and binoculars, you'd get this guy. He's got a rather unusual hobby. He strolls up to the obelisk every now and then and casually reads hieroglyphs. For fun. Yes, he can read them fluently. No, we don't know what that says about our own hobbies. Until 2021, experts believe that the inscriptions on the obelisk mainly praise the gods Amun or Amun-Ra, if you're on friendly terms, and Horus, you know, the falcon-headed sky god with those super famous parents Osiris and Isis. But during one of his casual reading sessions, Olet-Pelletier noticed something odd. Some of the hieroglyphs weren't just singing praises to the gods, they were giving directions. Literal directions to the entrance of the Temple of Luxor. But wait, it gets even better with a little backstory. Obelisks like this weren't just pretty lawn decorations. They were usually placed at the entrances of major temples, like the Temple of Luxor, where this one originally stood. They symbolize the sun god Ra and were meant to represent a ray of sunlight frozen in stone. Basically, they were giant sacred exclamation points showing off the pharaoh's divine connection and power. Ramses II had two of them set up at Luxor's entrance to honor the gods and, of course, to brag about himself. This one got shipped off to France in the 1830s as a gift from the ruler of Egypt, Muhammad Ali. No, not the boxer. And it's been waiting for someone to take a closer look at it. Moving the obelisk to Paris was no small feat. It weighed over 220 tons and had to be transported on a ship built especially for it, called the Luxor. How original. The whole transportation cost the modern equivalent to $19 million. Interestingly, its twin obelisk still stands in Luxor, which means that researchers can compare both structures to see if the story really matches. This pairing of obelisks was intentional, meant to guide the eye and the spirit towards sacred space. Lucky for us, Jean Guillaume picked the perfect moment to snoop around. The obelisk was undergoing restoration for the upcoming Olympic Games. Scaffolding was up, giving him rare access to the tippy top of the monument. Armed with binoculars and a ladder, he got eye level with parts of the pillar that most of us can only squint at from street level. And that's when he uncovered the real twist. Turns out, ancient Egyptians didn't just chisel random symbols into stone. They had something way cooler up their sleeves: crypto-hieroglyphs. Those were specialized coded forms of writing used for sacred or elite messages. Basically, ancient VIP-only emojis. While your average temple priest could read standard hieroglyphs, crypto-hieroglyphs were reserved for the pharaoh's inner circle. Today, only 6 people on Earth can read them fluently. And wouldn't you know it, our French friend is one of them. Of course he is. Now, here's where things get wild. Normally, hieroglyphs written on monuments like the obelisk are read top to bottom, right to left. Simple enough. But Jean Guillaume decided to break the rules and read them horizontally instead of vertically. That's when he started spotting weird patterns, phrases, and symbols that had been hiding in plain sight for nearly 200 years. Some of these messages were so cleverly hidden, and you could only understand them if you walked around the obelisk in a certain way. He calls it 3D cryptography. That's right, the obelisk itself is like one giant ancient Rubik's Cube. Depending on the angle you read from, the message could change entirely. Yes, ancient Egypt invented something like the lenticular effect long before Pokemon cards made it cool. Okay, so what in the world does the message say now? Glad you asked. These aren't just random notes from the past. They're political gold. One inscription praises Ramses II as a divine figure who could not be dethroned. Another says the king made offerings to the god Amun, which wasn't just him being nice. This was a big political move. Back then, religion and power were totally intertwined, so showing off your divine connection was like launching a PR campaign, except instead of tweets, they used 200-ton stone monuments. Ramses II wasn't just any ruler, by the way. He reigned for over 60 years and basically pulled off the Beyoncé of pharaonic careers. He won battles, or at least said he did, built cities, temples, and statues of himself all over Egypt, and declared himself a living god. When he ordered these obelisks, he wasn't just creating monuments. He was launching ancient propaganda flyers at priests, nobles, and visiting dignitaries. In fact, Ramses II was so good at self-promotion, he may as well be the original king of rebranding. He claimed victory at the Battle of Kadesh, even though it ended in a stalemate and they had the victory carved into walls and monuments across Egypt. The Luxor obelisk was another way of reinforcing his godlike powers every time someone passed by or read its text. And here's the cherry on top. Some of these inscriptions were positioned just right so they'd be seen by nobles arriving by boat for a festival. That's probably the reason why they can only be read from a certain angle. But if you stood at the base of the obelisk, you wouldn't see much. But from a 45-degree angle standing right in the middle of the Nile, sweet stuff! Imagine pulling up to a religious celebration and seeing giant stone text basically saying, "Hey, Ramses is chosen by the gods, don't forget it." Subtle? Not exactly. Effective? You bet. Some messages even carry double meanings. One line might spell out Ramses II's full royal title. But read it differently and boom! It says he's got eternal life. That's next-level branding. You can almost hear him saying, "Look at me, still trending 3,000 years later." For decades, scholars thought this monument had given up all its secrets, but thanks to new access, modern tools, and some fresh eyeballs, we now know there's still a ton to uncover. Oleg Pelletier's full research hasn't been officially published yet, but the clues he's found are already shaking up what we thought we knew about ancient Egyptian monuments. Of course, not everyone's buying it just yet. Some scholars are skeptical, especially about the idea that boat-riding nobles could actually see those messages clearly. But let's be honest, ancient advertising wasn't easy. Even if your billboard is 75 feet tall, you still need the right angle and the right audience. So the next time you're in Paris staring at the obelisk while sipping your overpriced café au lait, remember, you're not just looking at a fancy paperweight from the 19th century. You're standing in front of an ancient Egyptian PR campaign, a 3D puzzle, and a 3,300-year-old flex from Ramses II himself. And let's be real, if that obelisk had been hiding messages this long, who's to say it's done talking? So grab your magnifying glass, channel your inner Egyptologist, and remember, the real treasure isn't gold or jewels, it's the drama chiseled in stone. Welcome to one of the most mysterious and unexplored places on Earth. But what's so special about that? It's just some icy peaks and the endless snowy expanse of Antarctica. Yeah, that's right, but there's still a planetary scale mystery here. No matter how hard you try, you won't see a hidden mountain range, giant, unexplored land where no human has ever set foot, and it lies under another layer of mountains. It's like a nesting doll, but the size of a continent. These mountains hide Antarctica secrets, and these secrets can tell us something awesome about the ancient history of our planet. This gigantic unexplored territory in Antarctica is called the Gambritsev Subglacial Mountains. And the layer of ice above keeps this place untouched by nature and people. It's like a land inside another land, and it hides more than just mountains. There are valleys, hills, and plains. The whole area is similar to the European Alps, but unfortunately, we can't enjoy the view. Those mountains were first discovered in 1958 using seismological instruments. More than half a century has passed since then, and this place still remains one of the most poorly studied tectonic objects on Earth. Why? Because it's ice. A lot of ice. Who knows? Maybe there are some unknown ancient artifacts lying there. What if they're hiding a secret city or spaceships? It's unlikely, of course, but it would still be interesting to look there. Think about it. Hundreds or even thousands of miles of land that have remained unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. Even if no new species of animals or remains of an ancient civilization are there, this place still has a history. The history of the formation of continents on our planet. And scientists have already figured out some of this story. The mountains buried in Antarctica were originally like ordinary mountains, but as a result of a planetary scale event, they just… Wait a minute. Have you ever wondered how mountain ranges are formed? We see them in real life, in movies, in photos on the internet. We climb them. But how did they appear? Mountains have not always existed on the planet in this form. They appeared as a result of a large-scale collision of tectonic plates. Two giant solid chunks of ground are moving toward each other, then crash, and boom! Millions of tons of the Earth's crust pile on top of each other, mix, and form ledges and gorges. And all this can last for millions of years. Yes, it's a disaster, but it's very slow. Some tectonic plates are still colliding. For example, the Himalayas continue to grow because the Indian and Eurasian plates are still ramming into each other. And this process began about 50 million years ago. The Gambritsev Mountains under ice experienced a similar event, only much earlier. An article in the journal Earth and Planetary Science Letters says that they appeared during the formation of the supercontinent Gondwana. Two giant pieces of land were separated by a boundless ocean. But then, about 700 million years ago, they collided and formed Gondwana. This supercontinent included the territories of modern Africa, South America, Australia, India, and Antarctica. The giant pieces crashed into each other and released a stream of hot, partially molten rock. This mess grew bigger and bigger, forming mountains. The temperature of those mountains grew, their mass increased, and at some point, Gondwana became unstable. The supercontinent began to collapse under its own weight. The hot rocks below the surface began to flow sideways as a result of a process called gravitational spreading. Take toothpaste and start squeezing it out of the tube. Approximately the same thing happened with billions of tons of red-hot rock. Ancient mountains in Antarctica appeared right during this catastrophic event. You've just watched a visual simulation of global events that took place hundreds of millions of years ago. It looks cool, but how did scientists figure it out? How did they see this planetary-scale destruction? If the Gambritsev Mountains under ice is one of the most unexplored places in the world, then how could people find out its origin? The answer is simple. Tiny particles of rock have told us about the changing landscape of the planet. These are zircons, but scientists also call them time capsules. This mineral is very handy and resistant to mechanical and chemical influences. It's difficult to crush, it doesn't get affected by erosion, and it doesn't dissolve in water. And there's uranium inside it. This chemical element shows scientists the age of the rock. The fact is that uranium always decays into lead at the same rate. Scientists look at the ratio of uranium and lead and determine the age of minerals with great accuracy. Okay, this sounds a bit complicated. Here's a simple example. Imagine that each mountain belt is a clock that starts ticking at the moment of its formation. That is, after the collision of tectonic plates. After the rock forms, uranium begins its slow decay. The more time passes, the more uranium turns into lead. The rate of this decay is always the same. This decay can last for billions of years. The less uranium is in zircons and the more lead, the older the rock is. And this is how it happens in practice. Geologists take several rock samples. In a lab, they crush it to extract crystalline zircons. Geologists then dissolve the particles in acid to separate uranium from lead. Then they use a special device, a mass spectrometer that accelerates atoms and sorts them by mass. This is a rather complicated process, but the bottom line is that this device shows scientists the amount of uranium and lead. They look at the ratios of these two elements and calculate the age of the rock. Geologists took zircons from sandstones near the Gambritsev Mountains, studied those particles, looked at the level of uranium, and calculated the chronology of mountain formation. Then they compared the data obtained with the history of our planet and realized that the mountains buried in Antarctica appeared during the formation of the supercontinent Gondwana. But how did they find out that the supercontinent included Australia, India, and Africa? Zirconia from those Antarctic rocks turned out to be very similar to zirconium from those countries. That is, a long time ago, these three continents were together. So, the Gambritsev Mountains began to grow about 650 million years ago. About 580 million years ago, they reached the height of the Himalayas, and 80 million years later, they experienced the melting of the Earth's crust. And while most of the mountain ranges on the planet were changing and collapsing, the Gambritsev Mountains under ice remained untouched. Water, soil, wind, earthquakes, gravity, and other natural forces destroy mountain belts. This process is called erosion. But mountains buried in Antarctica haven't experienced anything like this. The cold temperature and the ice sheet around them kept this range unchanged. It's one of the best preserved ancient mountain belts on the planet. Okay, but why do we need to explore these mountains? What difference does it make that the supercontinent Gondwana collapsed in the past? It's possible that plants, frozen bodies of insects, or ancient bacteria have remained preserved under thick layers of ice. What about ancient animals? Many species could have lived on Gondwana. Studying ancient mountains in Antarctica can show us what the planet looked like about 500 million years ago. When Antarctica was a green continent, what lived on it? What happened to this life? Is it possible to revive those ancient creatures after so many years? If scientists were able to calculate the date of the supercontinent's appearance using tiny particles, then imagine what they could find after examining this hidden mountain range. It all sounds very interesting, but there's one problem. To take a small piece of this unknown world, you need to drill through a lot of ice. You need to deliver heavy equipment to one of the most inaccessible continents in the world, build stations, obtain an energy source, and conduct large-scale research. It sounds incredibly expensive, so this hidden territory will probably remain a mystery for a long time. Let's just hope that some billionaire will want to find out Antarctica's secrets and arrange a large-scale expedition there.
Some mountains look so picture-perfect that you'd swear they were hand-sculpted by a divine architect. And the thing is, you're not that wrong if you think so. Wait, did someone really build mountains? Hidden deep in the Amazon rainforest, there's a bizarre cone-shaped peak that raises that exact question. And halfway across the world, there's a landscape that looks like someone spilled a massive bag of Hershey Kisses across a green field. No, you can't make this stuff up. Get ready to learn what would happen if a Hershey's Kiss and the Road to El Dorado movie had a baby in real life, because we're diving into two of the most mysterious and oddly satisfying natural formations on Earth, Cerro El Cono in Peru and the Chocolate Hills in the Philippines. One might be an ancient lost pyramid, and the other turns into chocolate every year. Well, sort of. Let's start with El Cono. This strange, solitary mountain rises more than 1,300 feet above the treetops in the heart of the Amazon, right near the Peru-Brazil border. Sure, the Amazon is no stranger to mountains. There are impressive ranges, like the Ameri Mountains farther north and the Andes, not in the Amazon per se, but running along Peru's spine. But you see, El Cono is different. For starters, it's completely isolated. If you fly over the region in a helicopter, all you'll see for miles is an endless emerald sea of rainforest. Then, boom, out of nowhere, a perfectly cone-shaped mountain juts into the sky like a giant green Dorito. It's not part of any major mountain chain, it doesn't have any siblings, and it looks so symmetrical that it almost feels artificial. And it's covered by forest. Now, naturally, this has sparked all kinds of theories. Some people think it's an extinct volcano. Others say it's a freak of erosion. And then there are those who whisper more exciting possibilities. What if it's a lost pyramid? And before you roll your eyes, this idea is not as wild as it sounds. And some people actually stand by this theory. After all, the ancient civilizations of South America built pyramids too. What? Yeah, can you believe that the Egyptians didn't actually invent the concept of pyramids? No joke. The Mochi Chachapoya and Inca civilizations all built monumental structures. In fact, pyramids are found all over the world, from Ethiopia and Thailand to Greece, Mexico, and even Italy. So why do pyramids keep popping up throughout history? Simple. They're structurally sound. The broad base supports the weight, and the pointed top was often seen as a symbolic connection to the heavens. Okay, but what are the chances of all these people coming up with the same idea at the same time? Okay, calm down. Ancient aliens. Yeah, that's possible. But as it turns out, ancient people did talk to each other via trade, migration, and cultural exchange. Ideas like pyramids didn't need to come from a secret one-world civilization. They just came from smart, curious humans scattered across the globe, all looking up at the stars and wondering how to get closer. In fact, recent archaeological discoveries have revealed massive ancient cities deep in the jungle that were completely swallowed by nature. In Guatemala, scientists uncovered a lost Maya city with its own pyramid structures. In Mexico, an entire metropolis was found buried beneath forested hills. So yes, humanity can forget an entire city. Take another look at El Cono from the air, and you might start believing it too. Its slopes are smooth. Its symmetry is uncanny. From above, it resembles a colossal step pyramid or ziggurat, cloaked in jungle vines and secrecy. And if someone told you it was the moss-covered remnant of an ancient civilization, you might just nod and say, "Yeah, I see it." Of course, no one's proven anything yet. But the mystery is delicious, like a myth waiting to be cracked open. At the same time, for people who live nearby, El Cono isn't just a geological curiosity, it's sacred. In Andean cosmology, mountains like El Cono are known as apus, spiritual guardians of the land. These aren't just rocks, they're living beings, protectors, deities. Think Te Fiti from Moana, but South American and a little more mysterious. The indigenous tribes in the region still pay their respects to this mountain, treating it not as a tourist attraction, but as a sacred ancestor. And while everyone's busy debating whether El Cono is a mountain or a pyramid, nature's just vibing. The area surrounding El Cono is now part of Sierra del Divisor National Park, created in 2015 to protect one of the richest ecosystems in the Amazon. We're talking about rare plants, hundreds of bird species, many types of monkeys, and endangered animals like jaguars, giant armadillos, and even tapirs, the jungle's adorable pig-elephant hybrid. And yes, there are caves, springs, and even undiscovered ruins hidden deep in the forest around El Cono. So, what is El Cono really? Some geologists think it's likely a volcanic cone based on its shape. That's the official word from UNESCO anyway. Others argue it's a rare example of erosional geomorphology, a fancy way of saying wind, water, and time teamed up to carve a perfect mountain out of the landscape. Like geological origami, shaped by millions of years of natural forces. But the truth is, we don't know, not for sure, not yet. Until someone launches a respectful science-based expedition with drones, ground-penetrating radar, and a green light from the local communities, El Cono will keep its secrets. And maybe that's the best part. Sometimes it's mysteries that make the world feel truly magical. Now, let's jump onto a metaphorical plane and head to the Philippines, where the mystery continues and gets a little sweeter. Spread across more than 20 square miles, there are between 1,200 and 1,700, or even more, perfectly shaped hills that look like chocolate kisses. Like seriously. In the dry season, the grass turns brown, and suddenly, it's like someone dropped hundreds of Hershey kisses all over the landscape. Sweet, right? These are the Chocolate Hills, duh. And they're some of the Philippines' most iconic natural wonders. From afar, they look almost too symmetrical, like some alien landscaper came down with a measuring tape and a sense of humor. But how did they get here? Well, according to scientists, the Chocolate Hills are a rare type of karst formation, a term used to describe landscapes formed when slightly acidic rainwater dissolves soft rock like limestone. In this case, the hills were once coral reefs and marine limestone that were pushed above sea level by tectonic forces. Over time, the exposed rocks got eroded by wind, rain, and underwater rivers, leaving behind this stunning army of symmetrical mounds. It's a geological marvel millions of years in the making. But science isn't the only explanation in town. Local legends are more fun. One story says the hills were formed when two giants got into a rock-throwing fight, launching boulders at each other until they collapsed in exhaustion, leaving the landscape littered with mounds, just like that one scene from the Hobbit movie. Another tale speaks of a heartbroken giant whose tears turned into earth, forming the hills as a tribute to his lost love. Oh. Today, the Chocolate Hills are a National Geological Monument and a major tourist attraction in the Philippines. They're also being considered for UNESCO World Heritage status, because, really, where else can you find such a naturally satisfying mix of geology and dessert? If you ever want to visit, it's pretty easy. Fly into Boho Palango International Airport or take a ferry from Cebu, and then head to the towns of Carmen, Batuan, or Sambanga. There are designated viewing decks, eco-parks, and even ATV tours that will let you explore the hills up close. So, whether you're chasing lost pyramids in the jungle or climbing a mountain that turns into chocolate in the summer, the planet still has places that surprise and delight. And that's the real treasure. Sometimes, nature's weirdest, most beautiful shapes aren't hiding aliens or ancient tech. They're just proof that Earth has a wild imagination.
For years, the world's most valuable shipwreck was just a legend, until now. It has finally been found, and among the wreckage was a real treasure worth $1.1 billion. To understand this better, we need to go back to 1622. That year, the mighty Spanish galleon Nuestra Señora de Atocha set sail from Havana, packed with riches belonging both to King Philip IV of Spain and to the wealthy members of the crew. We're talking about gold, silver, copper, and emeralds from Colombia, Peru, Mexico, and Venezuela. The cargo was so large, totaling more than 40 tons, and so vast that it took 2 months to transport it to the ship. The ship was also packed with people. There were 265 people on board. At first, everything went well, but then came the Florida Straits and trouble. The crew found themselves lost in the night that was not only cold, but also stormy. And before long, they were facing a powerful hurricane. The wind tore the masts apart. Giant waves destroyed the rudder, and soon, the Atocha was sinking toward the darkness of the seabed. The disaster that night meant a huge loss of wealth for King Philip IV, but even worse was the loss of life. Of the original 265 crew members, only 5 survived. They managed to climb up the mizzen of the ship, the only part that remained above water. With all that treasure gone, the Spanish were quick to spring into action and devised a salvage operation. 5 ships were sent to recover the cargo. The plan seemed simple and easy. After all, the hatches were securely locked, so the treasure could still be there. But almost immediately, things went wrong. For example, one of the 5 ships ran aground before it could even begin its journey. In the end, the search dragged on for 60 years, and many factors contributed to the mission's failure. That may not seem so bad today, but back then, divers didn't have the technology or safety equipment that we have today. Exploring the seabed was risky, and more often than not, it led nowhere. While searching for the Atocha, the rescuers found traces of another vessel, the Santa Margarita, the Atocha's sister ship. Another hurricane passed through the region a month after the sinking. The seabed became a jigsaw puzzle with pieces of the ship scattered everywhere. The rescue mission became almost impossible. Over time, the Spanish managed to recover part of the Santa Margarita's cargo, but Atocha's treasure seemed lost forever. Even so, no one forgot that story. Then in 1969, more than 300 years after the sinking, everything began to change. An experienced deep-sea diver, Mel Fisher, stepped in and decided to rewrite history. Mel had already spent a big part of his life at the bottom of the sea. He and his wife even ran a diving school in California. So, Mel gathered his family and moved to the other side of the country. He led a new team of hunters whose mission was clear: to find the lost treasure of the legendary Atocha. They had little more than a boat, some diving equipment, and metal detectors, but that was enough to get them started. They focused on a region called the Matacumbe Keys, mentioned in several 17th century documents. In the first year, they traveled more than 100,000 miles but found absolutely nothing. It seemed like an impossible dream. But Mel still had a card up his sleeve: Eugene Lyon, a historian who would change the course of the search. Eugene delved into the Spanish archives in search of clues about the shipwreck. It was there that he found an important document that mentioned a group of people trying to save it. On the last page, it was mentioned that an area 100 miles from where Mel was searching had been the scene of the main exploration. This little piece of information was the needle in the haystack they needed. They rerouted the ship and soon arrived at the new location. But there was a challenge. That part of the ocean was deeper and the visibility there was almost zero. It was difficult to see your own hands. However, Mel knew how to deal with the adversities of diving and came up with a simple and brilliant solution. He installed 2 large tubes on the boat called letterboxes. Those tubes could be lowered in front of the propellers. The idea was ingenious. They sucked clean water from the surface and directed it to the bottom of the sea, exactly where the divers were. This technique not only cleared the murky water, but also helped to reveal objects that had been hidden for centuries. And still, the search took 16 years. During that time, Fisher found many lost items. Then, in 1971, they discovered a huge anchor. This was the first clue that they were close to finding the Atocha. In the following days, more objects appeared. Cups, swords, and ancient nails turned up. To keep everything organized, the team created a circular map. On it, they marked the exact location of each item they found. They also used radio transmitters on land and a receiver on the boat, which allowed them to know precisely where they were. The system was so efficient that it could measure the position with a margin of error of just 1 foot. Over time, a line began to form on the map, pointing to where the Atocha's main treasure might be hidden. They followed this trail for 2 years. Just when they were starting to lose hope, they found silver bars. It was the year 1973. This opened the door to much bigger discoveries. The silver alone was worth over $100,000, but the real treasure was yet to come. On July 20th, 1985, valuables that would be worth around $1.1 billion today were finally discovered in the main hull of the ship. The treasure included 180,000 silver coins, 24 tons of silver bars, 125 gold bars, a collection of pearls, and 66 pounds of emeralds. Some of these finds were priceless, not only because they were rare, but because of their history. The Atocha Cross, the Royal Orb, and the Atocha Ring, 3 royal artifacts, were found in near-perfect condition. The Atocha Cross was the most valuable of all the artifacts. It had 9 brilliant green emeralds set in 22-karat gold. A true treasure from the past, shining once again after centuries underwater. Soon after the discovery, the state of Florida thought, wait a second, we want a piece of that treasure. They went to court, demanding a whopping 25% of the value. A bitter legal battle ensued, and it lasted 8 years. It even went all the way to the Supreme Court. But in the end, treasure hunter Mel emerged victorious. He was even invited to The Tonight Show, showing off a massive gold chain found in the wreckage, wrapped around his waist like a belt. People called it the money chain, and for good reason. The find was so big that the wreck was declared the world's most valuable by the Guinness Book of Records in 2014. After the initial excitement, Mel sold some of the gems, but the bulk of the treasure remained in the family for a while. What was left was auctioned off. No one knows exactly how much the jewels were sold for, but one thing is for sure. Their value has skyrocketed over the years, and it's not just about the sparkle, it's about the legend that lives behind them. Today, these treasures are part of the particular Museo collection, the largest private collection of the Atocha artifacts in the world. And no, they're not for sale. But the good news is that you can still see them. They're on display, shining brightly in homage to Colombia's rich history and the famous mine from which they came. The people behind them say that these emeralds are as iconic as the rubies of Mogok or the sapphires of Kashmir. And honestly, they're right.
Stone Age people were grunting cavemen with spears. True or false? Absolutely false. They were gathering around and forming real culture as far as we've discovered. In Turkey, scientists uncovered a 12,000-year-old mystery that's revising history. It's a sophisticated cosmic calendar made out of giant stone temples that may actually be a warning from the stars. We're talking about Göbekli Tepe. This prehistorical site predates even Stonehenge, our classical stone ring circle, by 6,000 years. And it upends why we think Stone Age civilizations emerged and thrived. Here's how this discovery could change our collective history. Around 10,850 BCE, a massive comet, or better yet, a bunch of comet fragments, smashed into Earth. The skies darkened, the temperature dropped, big animals vanished, and it kicked off a mini ice age that lasted over 1,200 years. What's now a place called Göbekli Tepe was home to a group of humans who survived this entire chaotic event. After it happened, they started paying close attention to the sky. As a way of trying to control time a little bit more, they tracked the movements of the sun, the moon, the planets, and comets. This in turn led them to build a huge lunisolar calendar, the first one in the world. Now, if you were to tour around this classic Stone Age monument, you'd see that not all the stone pillars are blank. Some of them have carvings, like this main one with a bunch of V's on it. Turns out there are 365 V's, which scientists believe represent the days of the solar year. One of them, a V hanging on a bird's neck, is thought to mark a solar eclipse. Other pillars have dangerous animals carved on them, like foxes, lions, scorpions, vultures, twisting and crawling up the sides. Unlike typical Stone Age carvings, these weren't of edible animals like deer or sheep. One of the theories is that these drawings were symbolic. Some archaeologists believe they reflect the fears and chaos this civilization had lived through, a kind of collective attempt to make sense of a terrifying and unpredictable world. Archaeologist Danielle Stordour has highlighted the images of vultures, saying they represent the people who passed away. In some ancient cultures, vultures were believed to carry the souls of the deceased into another realm. She's seen similar symbols in ancient sites nearby. To understand why this all makes sense, we need to dig deeper into the real purpose of this site. Göbekli Tepe was discovered in 1994 by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who realized that the hill in southeastern Turkey wasn't just another Neolithic mound. Underneath it, his team uncovered massive stone circles supported by pillars weighing up to 20 tons. Radiocarbon dating puts the site at around 12,000 years old, making it the oldest known ceremonial structure ever built. I mean, it predates the Egyptian pyramids by over 7,000 years. This discovery shocked the archaeological world. At the end of the Ice Age, humans were supposed to be nomadic, surviving off wild plants and animals, not building sacred complexes with symbolic art, and giving birth to what we now classify as civilization. We usually think civilization starts with farming, then villages, then crops. But this site suggests something more surprising. Early humans may have come together not to grow food, but to worship. Schmidt found no signs of homes, hearths, or permanent settlement, just stuff used for rituals and gatherings. This has led researchers to believe that spirituality and communal rituals came first and that farming followed. Because to build something this massive, you'd need hundreds of people working together, which in turn would have sparked the need for food, organization, and social structure. In other words, the temple came first, then the village, then the farm. Now, Göbekli Tepe isn't just stirring debate because it's old. It's because it seems too advanced for its time, and that's where the more controversial theories start to emerge. Some researchers believe the builders of Göbekli Tepe weren't simply primitive hunter-gatherers experimenting with stone tools. They may have been the inheritors of ancient knowledge, remnants of a much older civilization that existed before the end of the last ice age. This idea ties into the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, a theory that a comet struck Earth around 10,850 years ago, triggering a sudden and catastrophic climate shift. According to this view, the survivors of that event passed down their knowledge through symbolism, architecture, and oral tradition. And Göbekli Tepe could be one of the earliest attempts to preserve that memory. Now, if that's true, then the carvings at this site, especially the animal symbols on the pillars, aren't just decorative. They could be astronomical codes, tracking constellations and celestial events. But one pillar might hold the biggest secret of all. It's called the Vulture Stone, and it's freaking archaeologists out. On it, you'll find a strange combination of figures: a headless man, birds, and a scorpion. To the untrained eye, it might seem random, but some researchers believe these are ancient representations of constellations, like Scorpius among them, and that the headless man symbolizes a mass extinction event. Some even argue that this is the oldest known record of a comet impact, the one that triggered the Younger Dryas. And if you're wondering who this older lost civilization might have been, they are called Atlantis, or more neutrally, Civilization X. Theorists like Graham Hancock suggest that this advanced culture, destroyed in the chaos of the comet impact, passed fragments of its knowledge to survivors around the globe. In that case, Göbekli Tepe wasn't the start of civilization, it was the restart. Now, back to the stones. Pillar 43 may look like a celestial calendar at first, but when archaeologists recreated the sky patterns encoded in its carvings, they found a precise snapshot of the sky dating back over 13,000 years. It appears to show a meteor shower, a flood, and humanity's tragic end, aka the Headless Man. A snake rising from the ground might even symbolize tidal waves or destruction coming from below. But the story doesn't end there. Pillar seems to expand on the same disaster, the one they called the Terror of the Sky. You might see animals fleeing, waves, fire raining down. It paints a vivid picture of the meteor shower. But wait! While Pillars 43 and 56 may encode memories of a past catastrophe, Pillar 18 might be a forecast. That stone zooms in on the Aquarius constellation. If this sounds familiar, maybe it's from the phase Age of Aquarius, which is the age we're living in now. Some enthusiasts believe this may be a warning for us, and may be telling us that a similar meteor shower will hit Earth and thus you and me and us. I mean, chills! But hey, that's the kind of mystery that makes Göbekli Tepe so captivating. Today, archaeologists know that Göbekli Tepe was part of a much larger sacred complex, now known as Taş Tepeler. A network of ancient sites across the region, each with its own secrets and structures, but connected by shared patterns and motifs. In 2019, excavations began at this sister site, just 40 miles from Göbekli Tepe, known as Karahan Tepe. And here's the twist. Some researchers believe Karahan Tepe might be even older. Unlike Göbekli Tepe, which appears to have been primarily ceremonial, Karahan Tepe has signs of domestic structures like walls, tools, and perhaps even homes. And that changes everything. Because whether these sites were the work of highly sophisticated hunter-gatherers or survivors carrying the fragments of a lost pre-Ice Age civilization, one thing becomes clear. Our ancestors weren't just surviving. They were planning, tracking, and predicting. They were far more capable, curious, and connected to the universe than we ever gave them credit for.
Archaeologists recently found something fascinating from a forgotten Maya kingdom, a tomb hidden in a collapsing pyramid. Inside, there was a king buried for 1,700 years, a jade mask that looks almost human, but not quite. And all this thanks to the looters who missed it by just 6 feet. They stumbled upon it in 2022 in the dense jungles near the border of Guatemala, Mexico, and Belize. In Mayan times, this little place used to be called Xochitlam. It's a lost city, half swallowed by jungle. This place meant pretty much nothing compared to other big Mayan cities, like Tikal or Teotihuacan, or so we thought. The team found a tomb of a Mayan ruler. The artifacts, the names of kings, all this revealed that Xochitlam wasn't just some tiny village. It was a pretty important place for that culture. And what they found inside that tomb may rival the treasures of any Maya metropolis. The tomb's ceiling had collapsed long ago, but the offerings were still inside and remained intact even after centuries. They recovered over 16 spondylus shells. These things were used by the ancient elite for power and rituals. That meant that whoever the tomb was related to, it was someone wealthy, of high status, who got themselves a ceremonial burial. Archaeologists also found carved femur bones. They were etched with hieroglyphs and names. Maya literally wrote their history in human remains. Researchers want to dive super deep and get a DNA analysis on the bones. Maybe that will help uncover familial ties, origins, or health problems these people might have faced. And most important of all, the mosaic jade mask. It was pieced together from luminous green tiles into an expression that feels almost human, almost alive. A lot of people were joking that it's just like Jim Carrey's mask in the famous movie. But it wasn't a magical artifact. That was the face of a forgotten Maya king, staring out at us after 1,700 years of silence. His name was etched into the femur bones, Itzam Kokaj Balam. Historians think this might be the ruler who reigned around 350 BCE. Unfortunately, this period is super underdocumented. We barely know anything about those times, but it looks like he was pretty important to the locals. One of the bones even showed a carved figure holding a deity's severed head. The deity's head looks exactly like the jade mask. Perhaps this was supposed to be the king himself, defeating some mythological villain. Other inscriptions mention the king's father and grandfather. That links Xochitlam to the mighty Maya capitals we mentioned, Tikal and Teotihuacan. Tikal was once the beating heart of the Maya world. It was a fascinating megapolis. A city rose from the Guatemalan lowlands with towering step pyramids that scraped the sky. That place was home to tens of thousands of people. It was also a hub of art, astronomy, and culture. The rulers were worshipped almost as living deities. Their deeds were carved into stelae that still stand amid the howler monkeys. Teotihuacan was located even further north. Now that was a mystery of another kind. It wasn't really Mayan, but rather Central Mexican. But still, that was a true metropolis, one of the largest cities in the world during its time. It was most famous for its Avenue of the Dead and colossal structures like the Pyramid of the Sun. It was a rich cultural center that had a worldwide influence. For centuries, both Tikal and Teotihuacan seemed to have completely different cultures. Tikal was a flourishing city-state where people loved reading, astronomy, and beautiful architecture. Teotihuacan was a titanic militaristic superpower. Two big centers of Mexico, separated by 600 miles of jungle and mountains. Compared to these imperial capitals, Xochitlam was a whisper. But it looked like this Itzam guy from the tomb wasn't just a ruler of a random village. He seemed to have political ties in ancient Mesoamerica. The craziest part is that we almost lost this piece of history, all because of the looters. At some point in the past, grave robbers had tunneled dangerously close. They stopped digging just 6.5 feet away from the tomb. That's just like in that meme with the diamonds. Sometimes you stop digging right before you hit it big. But in our case, thank heavens they didn't get there first. That's how close we came to losing a piece of history. In an almost poetic irony, it was the looters' tunnels themselves that led Estrada Belli's team to the site. Archaeologists have been looking around and using the so-called LiDAR technology. That's basically laser beams shot from high above, which help them map the spot. It's like taking X-rays of the jungle floor. And that's when they found the little signs of intrusion. They quickly realized that if someone was digging here, they were probably looking for something important. Without the failing looters, they might have walked past a discovery. In any case, archaeologists want to keep searching. They might even find more chambers buried inside the abandoned pyramid. We just keep finding mysterious things related to the Maya. Recently, buried deep within the ruins of Tikal, archaeologists found a house, and in that house, a limestone altar. It was covered in vibrant murals of red, yellow, and black. What's weird is that this build wasn't made by Maya. It was unmistakably Teotihuacan in style. And just like the tomb from before, it was made about 1,700 years ago. The altar was discovered inside a Maya-era residence known as Group 6DX7. It stood 3.5 by 6 feet right in the center of the home. That was very typical for Teotihuacan traditions. It bore a mural of the storm god that was also a central deity in the Teotihuacan pantheon. But this altar depicted no kings and no rulers. That's very weird. As we said, Maya worshipped and honored their dynasties and political power, putting them pretty much everywhere, like some merch. But instead, this altar worshipped the deities alone, and it did so in the heart of Maya's main capital, Tikal. When archaeologists dived deeper, they saw it as unmistakable proof that Teotihuacanos not only came to Tikal, they thrived there. This house wasn't some trade outpost. People actually lived in it. Teotihuacanos built homes, practiced their rituals, and left their deities behind in this city. And Maya seemed to be chill about that. Researchers think this was a home for some elite people from Teotihuacan, or maybe it belonged to Mayans who practiced Teotihuacano culture and deeply respected it. But it might be something darker than a simple, friendly multiculturalism. The two cities weren't in the best relationship. There was some tension, maybe even surveillance. The house and the altar were probably built around 300 to 400 BCE. That was a period when Tikal was rising in power. This might have caught the attention of the mighty empire to the north. It's almost as if Mayans poked the beast. By 400 to 450 BCE, that attention may have become something sinister. The altar could have actually been the symbol of domination. Had the Maya of Tikal truly welcomed their guests, or did they come here and bluntly started building foreign altars in sacred spaces? Did Teotihuacan use this as some kind of soft invasion? In that case, it would make sense for Mayans to destroy that place or vandalize it somehow. Mayans regularly buried their buildings and rebuilt on top of them. But for some reason, this altar remained untouched. Mayans found it and buried it with the surrounding buildings as they were. No vandalism, no destruction, no rebuilding even. Looks like they had some complicated feelings about Teotihuacans. It was a time when cultures clashed, fused, overlapped, and possibly spied on each other. Perhaps one day we'll learn more about what really happened among these ancient civilizations.
The Sahara Desert is like a Mad Max movie. Scorching heat, endless dunes, and an overall barren wasteland. A place where no one could live, right? Well, forget all you know about it, because 5,000 years ago, the Sahara was a lush paradise of grasslands, lakes, and rivers, and the home of a ghost civilization that vanished without a trace. Our tale begins in the 1930s, when a Hungarian explorer stumbled upon a cave in the middle of the Sahara. Inside, he found something bizarre: ancient rock paintings of people swimming in a lake, surrounded by giraffes, hippos, and crocodiles. At the time, everybody shrugged it off as some symbolic depiction of the afterlife, because really, who would imagine a lake in the Sahara? Well, fast forward some 70 years later, when a group of archaeologists made a discovery that flipped the script. In a rock shelter in Libya, they unearthed 15 mummies, along with baskets, ceramic pots, and other everyday items. This may look like prehistoric junk to most people, but to archaeologists, it was like uncovering a key piece of evidence. Those people weren't just passing through, they lived here. You see, those weren't just any mummies. They were some of the oldest naturally mummified humans ever found, dating back over 7,000 years. Take that, Egypt. Two of them still had readable DNA, preserved thanks to a rare natural mummification process, almost a miracle considering the Sahara's climate's ability to turn everything into, well, beef jerky. Scientists struggled to understand where those mummies came from for a while, because the mitochondrial DNA they recovered was not helpful at all. But thanks to scientific progress, they eventually managed to do a full genome analysis that revealed some weird secrets. Those people belonged to a human lineage that was completely unknown, and they lived isolated from the rest of humanity for thousands of years. For decades, researchers assumed that the place where they lived, the Green Sahara, was like a prehistoric highway, a lush corridor that humans and animals used to migrate between sub-Saharan Africa and the Mediterranean. But the mummies demolished that theory, like a hippo sitting on a sandcastle. Their DNA showed zero genetic mixing with sub-Saharan and Eurasian migrants, keeping their genes pure for 7,000 years. Their closest genetic relatives weren't their neighbors living right below the famous desert, but some ancient hunter-gatherers from Morocco, and even some guys that lived in the Czech Republic, when it wasn't even a country yet, 50,000 years ago. We're not out of the woods yet, because those mummies also carried some teeny-tiny traces of Neanderthal DNA, just 10% of the amount found in modern Eurasians. Now, if you paid attention in school, then you know that Neanderthals lived in Europe and Asia, and early humans only mixed with them after migrating out of Africa. But those green Sahara folks never left Africa. So how did they get Neanderthal genes? The leading theory is that their ancestors mingled with Neanderthals in North Africa 50,000 years ago before settling in the Sahara and cutting off contact with the outside world. Archaeologists also found cattle bones and tools made of stone and wood at that rock shelter, proving that those people led a thriving pastoral lifestyle. This discovery made scientists scratch their heads for a while because, you see, animal domestication was not developed in Africa. So how did they learn it if they never mingled with anyone? Did they have ancient YouTube tutorials? Probably not. The researchers believe they must have traded knowledge with neighboring groups, but just knowledge, no saliva. It's almost too hard to believe that no outsiders mixed with them. After all, who wouldn't want to live in a thriving civilization in the middle of a green paradise, drinking milk, eating meat, and even using animal blood as a protein source? Ooh, yummy. They didn't have to hunt for every meal, thanks to their livestock, and the abundant water made life pretty sweet. And yet, they never married outsiders. Why? Maybe it was a cultural choice to never date outside their own group. Or maybe the landscape itself kept them isolated. This is where scientists place their bets. They believe that the dense forests and rivers that existed in the green Sahara acted like nature's no trespassing sign, creating a geographical barrier that isolates animals, plants, and whole societies. This isolation is the reason why their genes were so unique. These guys weren't swapping spit with anyone else. But this genetic time capsule almost didn't survive. For most of the last ice age, the Sahara was even harsher than today, a true dead zone where humans couldn't survive. 70,000 years ago, even the toughest people disappeared, retreating to the Nile Valley and the Mediterranean coast. Why? Because Earth was a climate bully. Massive glaciers stole all the moisture, weakening monsoons until rain clouds barely reached North Africa. Then came the knockout punches. Armadas of icebergs flooded the North Atlantic, triggering devastating droughts each time. This was the Sahara's ultimate keep-out era. Now, you're probably wondering how in the world the Sahara turned green after all this, and then went back to being a desert again. Well, it all started 15,000 years ago, I wasn't around then, when Earth was shaking off the last ice age. Our planet's axis was a bit wobbly, and because of that, the northern hemisphere got closer to the sun, getting extra sunlight and heat. This eternal summer turned North Africa into a giant moisture magnet, pulling water from the Atlantic and making it all rain down on the Sahara. The result of this ridiculous amount of rain was a lush savanna, complete with lakes the size of small countries. But the African humid period was not just a one-time miracle. The truth is, this eternal on and off switch between green and desert happened to the Sahara more than 230 times since the desert was born. During one of these events, the Sahara even expanded, getting bigger than it is today. So when the green Sahara showed up, you can bet it brought the ultimate ecosystem glow-up. This wasn't just a light dusting of grass. We're talking full makeover. The transformation was so complete, it even reshaped animal populations. Cheetahs suddenly struggled with the new prey dynamics, while rodents like the multi-mammate mouse thrived in the suddenly abundant grasslands. But don't pack your prehistoric swim trunks just yet. This paradise had teeth. The Sahara was an ecological maze of crocodile-infested rivers, malaria-carrying mosquitoes, and big cats lurking in the tall grass. Crossing it would have been like playing a real-life game of Hungry Hungry Hippos. This is probably why more groups didn't settle permanently. The Sahara's climate cycled between wet and dry every 20,000 years, hardly a stable zip code. For most ancient people, it was smarter to treat the green Sahara like an all-you-can-eat buffet, grab resources and leave before the desert returned. Still, this green Sahara period lasted for 10,000 years, giving our mystery shepherds plenty of time to thrive. But around 5,000 years ago, Earth's axis shifted again, the rains moved away, and the Sahara dried up faster than a puddle in July. As the desert returned, the shepherds from the green Sahara had no choice but to pack up their livestock and leave. Some researchers believe they migrated toward the Nile, laying the groundwork for ancient Egypt, so I guess their legacy lives on. Besides, their pure lineage may be extinct by now, but some faint genes of the mummies can still be found in the people that live in North Africa today. But the introvert mummies were not the only ones using the Green Sahara as an Airbnb. They actually had neighbors just around the corner, in a lakeside village in Niger to be exact. Those people thrived for 5,000 years and left behind the oldest Sahara Desert cemetery, including a man buried in a turtle shell, a grinning Halloween man with filed teeth, and a heartbreaking family embrace frozen in time, victims of the very waters that sustained them. Eventually, those people disappeared too, just like it happened to our antisocial friends. This proves that this desert outsmarts everyone, with a landscape that gives paradise with one hand and takes it away with the other.
Over the years, archaeologists have uncovered all kinds of stuff on runestones: curses, poems, protective magic spells, and even inheritance disputes. However, a newly uncovered ancient Norse artifact known as Svingerud stone has just one word on it. Sounds boring, right? Well, think again, because this might just be the oldest runestone ever discovered. Almost 2,000 years old. But that's not all. Excavations are still ongoing, and depending on what follows next, it could unravel secrets and the true meaning behind the mysterious magical runes. So let's explore and see just how much known history you can rewrite with only one engraved word on a stone. A long time ago, during the first few centuries of the Common Era, Scandinavians and Romans crossed paths. They traded goodies like glass and silver. And eventually, Roman customs and even written culture ended up north. The Nords liked the Roman alphabet but wanted their own letters copyrighted. So they decided to create their own unique characters, which they called runes. Almost 20 centuries later, in 2021, archaeologists were excavating an Iron Age burial site near the village of Svingerud in eastern Norway. Among the cremation graves, they uncovered a reddish sandstone slab that would become a centerpiece in a major Norwegian archaeological discovery. It's the size of a coffee table, measuring just over 12 inches across. The stone was found buried with burned bones and charcoal, part of an early cremation grave. The stone had runes engraved into it, looking rough and shallow, like they were scratched with the tip of a knife or something needle-like. Runestones are not unusual. Archaeologists are used to uncovering runic inscriptions, especially in this region. However, tests show that both the burial site and the carving on the stone likely date back to somewhere between the 1st and 3rd centuries. That places it deep in pre-Viking history, centuries before the Viking Age officially began around 800 CE. That makes it one of the oldest reliably dated examples of early writing in Scandinavia. When you look at these carvings, they either look like magical symbols made to call on Nordic deities to help you, or like random scratches made by an angry man hitting a stone with something sharp. But these are real letters, crude but intentional. It's an ancient writing system used by Germanic tribes across Northern Europe. They were engraved into wood, bone, or stone. Their shapes are straight, angular lines because curves were tough to carve with the tools they had back then. When they met with the Roman Empire, rather than just borrowing Latin letters, the Germanic tribes took the idea of writing and carved out their own version. The original alphabet was called Elder Futhark. It had 24 letters. We can find them on artifacts dating from around the 2nd to the 8th century CE. Its name comes from its first 6 letters: F, U, Th, A, R, and K. Each rune probably had a name that matched the sound it made. For example, the rune that sounds like A was called Anzus. However, nobody from back then left us a memo explaining the names. In fact, the knowledge of how to read them was forgotten until 1865, when Norwegian linguist Sophus Bugge deciphered them by comparing clues. He examined later rune alphabets and ancient poems that referenced the runes, like a detective sketching a suspect from scattered witness clues. For many runes, especially the oldest ones in the Elder Futhark, the meaning is still open to interpretation. They weren't common knowledge, which is reflected by the fact that only some 350 surviving inscriptions remain. This changed eventually when the Scandinavian language evolved from Proto-Norse into Old Norse, spoken by mighty Vikings. The Elder Futhark was reduced from 24 to 16 runes to reflect the changes in the language, thus becoming the Younger Futhark, which was far better spread. Runes weren't really used to write books or keep daily records. Instead, you'd find them carved on gravestones, weapons, and various tools. It's believed that people used runes to show ownership, honor loved ones who had passed away, leave short messages, or sometimes for protection or magic. In the early days, some runes probably had special spiritual or ritual meanings too. One interesting fact about runestones specifically is that they were often used for self-promotion or boasting, like an ancient social media status or a tweet posted on a wall, or better said, a stone. One such example of a runestone from the 11th century where a man named Vigmund had it carved for himself, calling himself the cleverest of men. He even added that he was a ship captain, and yes, he made sure everyone knew that while he was alive. In the Old Norse poem Havamal, Odin says he hung on the world tree for 9 nights, pierced by a spear, to gain knowledge of the runes. This goes to show just how powerful and mystical those symbols were perceived to be. It's fitting that the word rune comes from a Proto-Germanic word which can be translated as secret or whisper. There's a common saying about power being in words, and for the old Germanic tribes, that power felt like actual magic. It's also why it's important to know when this magic came to be. And the Svingerud runestone tells us that. But it's not just when it was written, it's also what's written on it, where, and why. The location where the Svingerud stone was discovered is already a significant archaeological site. It's famous for its incredible discoveries, including the remarkable Jormunbu helmet, the only Viking helmet ever found in Norway. The stone was placed in a cremation pit, alongside the remains of an adult and a few personal items. Thanks to charcoal and bone samples, researchers can figure out how old the runestone is by using a method called radiocarbon dating. The Svingerud stone isn't the first ancient Norse artifact with runes that archaeologists have discovered, not even close. People carved runes into all sorts of everyday objects like combs, jewelry, and knives long ago. Some of those might even be just as old. Other finds have runes, but they're often broken, loose, or don't have clear dating. However, with radiocarbon dating, scientists have confirmed that the Svingerud stone is really the oldest runestone ever found. The writing on it suggests that it was part of a ritual and might have even been a message to the deceased. The inscription isn't long. It's just one word, Idiburg. No one knows exactly what it means. The clearest part says Idibera, and most researchers agree it's probably a name. Maybe Idibera in a genitive form, meaning of Idibera or belonging to Idibera. So this could be the name of the person buried there or someone being honored. There's a decent chance it's a female name, possibly making this the earliest known female rune inscriber in history. But researchers now believe that the Svingerud runestone is a part of a bigger monument. They found more than a dozen sandstone pieces scattered across several graves at the site, and when they assembled them in the lab, they fit together like a puzzle. This suggests they all came from one single upright stone. The main piece with the inscription was found in one grave, but other similar pieces were buried in nearby cremation pits. Archaeologists think it was broken and reused in a ritual, maybe to connect different people or generations who had been buried there. Instead of just marking one grave, it might have first been a memorial and was later put back into the other graves as a symbolic act. Some even speculate that the runes might have been carved by different hands throughout various time periods. The Svingerud stone might be small, but as the oldest runestone ever found with a secure archaeological context, it could be the key to how writing first took root in Northern Europe. This Norwegian archaeological discovery proves that runes were already tied to ritual, memory, and maybe even women. And if it's just a fragment of a larger monument, we've only seen part of the picture. Ancient Norse artifacts like this reshape what we know about pre-Viking history. And with luck, more runestones will follow, maybe even from another female rune inscriber.
Hey, welcome to the Dino New Year's Party. Hey, everyone you know well is here. Tyrannosaurus, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Raptor, Diplodocus. But there will also be someone new, a guest who will surprise you. You see, paleontologists have discovered a new dinosaur species that was somewhat like the T-Rex, but with a twist. These guys would rather eat a crunchy salad than a juicy steak. Hey, meet this dude. Any guesses on how to pronounce this? Duonicus saccobatri. Thanks, please hold your applause. These are herbivorous guys that belong to the therizinosaurs. But they had one awesome feature. A feature that showed scientists that Duonicus belonged to a new branch of dinosaur evolution, about which little is known. But hey, let's go back to the dino party, shall we? Here you can see dinosaurs with different personalities. The T-Rex is a bully and toothy. The Velociraptor seems to be very toxic and moody. Will never be annoying. Therizinosaurs lived in what is now Asia and North America during the late Cretaceous period, about 100 to 66 million years ago. Their anatomical features made them look more like predators, like the T-Rex. But therizinosaurs were herbivores, with large crescent-shaped claws. In some species, they reached up to 20 inches. Now imagine how dangerous these monsters would have been had they been carnivorous. But they used their claws to grab tree branches and eat leaves. The Duonicus was quite large, just under 10 feet in length. A hippo was about the same size, and their weight was about 600 pounds, which is almost half the size of a horse. Therizinosaurs had a long mouth, a bit like a duck's nose, and long front paws with 3 thumbs. But the Duonicus, that has been found recently, was unique because it only had 2 fingers on each hand. The 2-fingered dinosaur discovery has sparked joy among paleontologists. Okay, 2 fingers instead of 3, whatever, you might think. But it makes a big difference. It shows how dinosaurs evolved. The latest paleontology news reports that the discovery was made in Mongolia. It was the largest preserved claw in history. Its size was about 11 inches, and it had a curved shape. That means it was like a giant banana. The coolest thing was that the claw was covered with keratin. Our nails are made from this material too. Can you imagine? Large lizards that lived tens of millions of years ago had claws with the same composition as our nails. Nature is amazing, isn't it? Do you know this crazy theory that the T-Rex evolved into a chicken and the Velociraptor into an ostrich? There must have been tons of evolutionary changes. But the 2-fingered dinosaur discovery offers us a more understandable and more detailed explanation of how dinosaurs evolved. Therizinosaurs had 3 clawed fingers on each paw, but why did nature get rid of one of them? Scientists believe that it was practical. It's possible that a paw with 2 fingers was much stronger and more flexible than a paw with 3. This way, dinosaurs could grab vegetation and branches, like chameleons do. Scientists have also suggested that the 2-fingered long paw helped the dinosaur defend itself, care for its mates, and even play. It's hard to imagine what they could be playing at. Maybe they did high fives or high twos. It would be cool if they had used those paw pliers not only for taking food, but for fighting off predators. And speaking of predators, the T-Rex had a similar front paw structure, but its small paws were useless. It would be cool if the Duonicus could box with them or climb trees. Yes, it was an herbivore, but that doesn't mean that other bad dinosaurs could bully it. Let's just think that the Duonicus was kind of weak and formidable to the strong. That's why it would be the most welcome guest at the dinosaur party. But the strangest guest at this party would be the Dinochirus, named Terrible Hands. The case of the Deinonychus shows how dinosaurs evolved from having 3-fingered paws to being 2-fingered. The Dinochirus shows that ancient lizards could evolve into a horse, or something else. It sounds weird, but let's get to know this guy better. In 1965, the arms, hands, and shoulder girdle of an unknown dinosaur was discovered in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. When paleontologists put the bones together, they got two long, creepy arms. For many years, those arms remained in the museum without a body. It looked funny and a little scary. Each arm was about 8 feet long. This is more than the tallest basketball players. Paleontologists were trying to find other dinosaur body parts in the Gobi Desert, but their attempts were unsuccessful. The Dinochirus became one of the most famous mysteries in paleontology. How big was the owner of such arms? What did it eat? How did it live? This remained unknown until 2014. According to the latest paleontology news about this lizard, a group of scientists from the Korea Institute of Geoscience and Mineral Resources has discovered other well-preserved remains of the Dinochirus. With their help, paleontologists have managed to recreate the lizard's appearance. And that breakthrough has turned out to be much cooler than the two-fingered dinosaur discovery. Are you ready? The Dinochirus was colossal, rather slow, with a horse-like head and a spine that formed something like a hump. It looks super weird, even for a science fiction movie. This new dinosaur species belonged to Ornithomimosauria, an ostrich-like species, agile and fast-moving. But not the Dinochirus. Instead of speed and agility, the dinosaur had a large size. It was 36 feet long and weighed 13,200 pounds, which is almost the weight of an adult elephant and the length of half a metro wagon. Despite its size, the Dinochirus was quite harmless. Its long muzzle looked like that of a duck or a horse. It also had no teeth. So, for tyrannosaurs and other predatory giants, it was an easy lunch. And this is not just a guess. Scientists found bite marks on the discovered skeletons of this dinosaur. It seems this poor big dude met some really bad and hungry guys. But what was lunch to this strange lizard itself? It ate almost everything: soft plants, algae, small vertebrates, and fish. It sucked food from the bottom of lakes and rivers with its beak and tongue and swallowed stones to help grind the food. Those stones crushed the pieces of food and thus helped the stomach to digest stuff more easily. The dinosaur used its terrible hands to dig and pick up food from trees and the ground. But the strangest part of its body was its back and tail. The bones at the end of its tail were joined into a single structure called a pygostyle. This thing supports the feathers of modern birds. Now, it's possible that the Dinochirus waved its tail like a fan, and its back had thick bone spikes that stuck up from its spine. Considering that those bones were covered with skin, the whole strange skeleton structure looked like a sail. You know how dinosaurs evolved to have such a strange shape, and probably ask yourself, hey, what's the point? Well, scientists believe that the ligaments coming out of the spine help support the dinosaur's heavy belly and legs. To better understand how that could work, imagine cable-stayed bridges. Long vertical beams have many cables that hold the roadway. Similar, the Dinochirus spikes and ligaments help to hold the dinosaur's weight. Now, back at our dino party, it would be a shy, tall dude who accidentally drops a drinking glass and makes you feel awkward. It's lonely. It dreams of finding friends. And it will surely find them. A Diplodocus would make a great buddy. A herbivorous dinosaur with 2 fingers that looks like a predator and a horse-like giant with 2 long arms show us how diverse dinosaur evolution can be. T-Rex, Velociraptor, Diplodocus, and others are the superstars of the ancient world. It would be cool if paleontologists could discover new dinosaur species that would remove the old guard from their pedestal of fame. Would you like to see a movie starring the Dinochirus and the Duonicus? Hey, I would.
About 14,000 years ago, some super skilled builders from another planet landed on Earth. Their mission was to help build a massive stone complex with perfectly interlocking blocks. They used some advanced technology, centuries ahead of their time. And once the job was done, they disappeared without a trace. This is not a sci-fi plot, but one of the theories trying to explain the mystery of Puma Punku. Scientists don't officially accept it, but they still don't know for sure how, when, and who built this impressive construction. Puma Punku is part of the ancient city of Tiwanaku, near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. Tiwanaku is an important place in Inca traditions. They believed it to be the place where the world was created. Historians believe Puma Punku was built around 536 AD. The first Europeans discovered it in the middle of the 16th century. At the heart of Puma Punku, there is a huge, terraced platform filled with massive stone blocks, some as big as a school bus. The largest one weighs a jaw-dropping 131 tons. That's heavier than 20 elephants. Even the smaller rocks are as big as a couch. Archaeologists believe there were at least 5 big gateways, as well as several smaller ones that may have been part of a grand monument. The site is built using 2 types of stone, red sandstone and andesite, which is one of the hardest rocks on Earth. The 8-shaped blocks of the construction fit together like puzzle pieces. They all look the same, as if they were mass-produced in a factory. But that should have been impossible for an ancient civilization. Even the smaller rocks are as big as a couch. These blocks were carved with precise holes and grooves to fit together. Builders made perfectly straight lines, cut identical angles, created smooth surfaces, and drilled holes. Some scientists believe they may have used advanced techniques, but there's no record of the tools they used. It took another 1,000 years before other civilizations could match this level of precision. One of the biggest mysteries is how these enormous stones were transported. Puma Punku sits high up in the mountains at 12,600 feet above sea level. So high that even trees don't grow there. The builders didn't have wheels, cranes, or modern machines. Yet somehow, they moved these heavy blocks miles from their original locations. Some scientists think they used llama skin ropes and ramps, but no one really knows for sure. The most commonly accepted version is that the Tiwanaku civilization, which thrived in the region between 500 and 1000 CE, built this impressive site. The complex was enormous and had many different areas. A western court, a large open area in the center, and an eastern court that was surrounded by walls. Long ago, it must have been incredibly beautiful, with polished metal plaques shimmering in the sunlight, brightly colored fabrics and ceramics decorating the buildings, and people in elaborate costumes walking through the plaza. But something doesn't add up here, as the Tiwanaku people never wrote down how they built Puma Punku. They would have probably left some clues if they had accomplished something like this. Plus, the Tiwanaku people didn't have the high-tech equipment needed to carve and move giant stone blocks with perfect precision. The architectural historians who first studied the place professionally concluded that a hammerstone couldn't have done such a fine job. They found no metal tools that were used in the construction process. That's why they suggested they might have used some unconventional tools the historians didn't even recognize as tools. There's a theory that these ancient builders might have had a way to soften stone to make it easy to carve before it hardened again. Or maybe they poured liquid stone into molds, just like we make concrete today. If it's true, this would mean an advanced civilization existed in South America long before we thought. Some researchers even think it had to do with the theory of Atlantis or other lost civilizations that may have had immense knowledge before a global catastrophe wiped them out. Local legends say that powerful deities used incredible powers to lift and shape the massive stone blocks. And some people believe Puma Punku was so advanced that the builders must have had help from visitors from outer space. The perfect cuts and massive stones look like something from modern construction. The supporters of this theory also say that some carvings at Tiwanaku show figures wearing helmet-like shapes, So they could be left by space travelers. Scientists from the University of California, Los Angeles, decided to officially debunk this theory. They created a digital model of Pumapunku using super precise measurements from historical records. Then, they used a 3D printer to make a miniature version of the site at 4% of its original size. Once the pieces were printed, the team sorted them by size, shape, and design, like a giant puzzle. They noticed that some blocks had special grooves for holding metal clamps, and others had ornamental carvings. When they finished their model, they realized one of the buildings had a very familiar design. It looked just like structures from two nearby sites. This was solid proof that Pumapunku was built by humans, not visitors from outer space. Over the centuries, people stole stones from Pumapunku and moved them around. This made things even more confusing for archaeologists. UCLA team created a digital archive, so researchers all over the world can now study the site without traveling to Bolivia. So maybe we'll hear about the new twists in this mystery soon. Another construction from the past that still impresses us with extreme precision is the Serapeum of Saqqara, a burial place built around 3,000 to 3,500 years ago. A French scientist accidentally discovered it in 1850. Inside the Serapeum, he found a long underground hallway. On both sides of the hallway, there were giant stone rooms, and inside those rooms, there were huge granite sarcophagi. These sarcophagi were not built for people, but for the sacred Apis bulls. These bulls were treated like royalty, as the people believed they were chosen by deities. The Egyptians believed these bulls were the incarnations of the deity Ptah and had magical powers to protect their kingdom. Some of the stone boxes inside the Serapeum weighed around 70 tons. They were made with perfectly straight angles and smooth surfaces. Scientists noted roller marks on the floor and found wooden winches with levers, which the Egyptians likely used to move the sarcophagi. Since the burial chambers were lower than the hallway floor, workers filled them with sand, rolled the sarcophagus into place, and then slowly removed the sand to lower it perfectly into position. A stone inscription found in the Serapeum said it took 28 days just to move one of these stone boxes. Even though these sarcophagi were meant for bulls, they were way bigger than needed. Pharaohs, who were the rulers of Egypt, were buried in tiny coffins. So it's really weird that these boxes were so enormous. Another question is why they used granite, which is so hard to carve, instead of limestone. Some people believe the stone boxes weren't just tombs. They might have been ancient energy generators. The Egyptians knew about fermentation. If someone placed food or meat inside a perfectly sealed granite box and let fermentation happen, pressure would build up inside. Granite contains quartz, a special crystal that creates electricity when squeezed. As pressure increased, the box's lid could pop open, releasing gas. Ancient drawings found in the Serapeum show stones stacked on top of the boxes, which might have been used to make the lids even heavier and help produce more electricity. Thousands of years later, when explorers opened these boxes, they only found bull bones, maybe because all the organic material had disappeared over time. Scientists still aren't sure if the massive stone boxes were actually ancient energy systems. So, the mystery lives on.
Wow! Scientists have found a lost city beneath Egypt's pyramids. And it's incredibly large, bigger than the biggest target you can imagine. Underground chambers, passageways, and vertical structures. Scientists have no idea what purposes they serve. But let's start from the very beginning. Italian and Scottish scientists studying the Pyramid of Khafra discovered something that looked like secret tunnels under 3 pyramids. This find might change what we know about ancient Egypt. The expedition, called the Khafra Project, was led by Corrado Malunga from Pisa, Italy, and Filippo Biondi from the University of Strathclyde, Scotland. Their mission was to focus on exploring Khafra's pyramid, the second largest on the Giza Plateau. Scientists uncovered a massive structure beneath the Pyramid of Khafra. Could it be an ancient Egyptian underground city? The experts analyzed the data they had and came to the conclusion that 8 large vertical structures could be hiding beneath, possibly wells or shafts. They extend a staggering 6,500 feet across. Imagine placing 2.5 Burj Khalifas on the ground, one after another, and you get the sheer size of this find. These shafts also plunge nearly 2,000 feet underground. Some of the deepest underground stations in the world are located at a mere 380 feet underground or so. These cylindrical shafts are surrounded by spiral paths. Picture some old Gothic castle. They're connected to 2 giant, weirdly shaped chambers. Are those cubes? Or possibly bowls? Each of these chambers is likely more than 260 feet across. Now, even though we know about the structures now, no one has figured out their original purpose yet. Want to hear something even more shocking? Okay then, the team is almost sure that similar access points can be found under all 3 pyramids. In other words, all of them might be linked by a hidden system of underground tunnels, chambers, and passages. Even deeper, about 4,000 feet under the surface, there might be more unknown structures. And doesn't it add to the mystery? But the coolest news is that, according to some team members, these hidden structures near Giza pyramids could align with the legendary Halls of Amenti. In ancient Egyptian mythology, it's a place where people are believed to arrive when they're close to the end of their days. There, they are said to take a 3-day-long trial, facing their biggest fears. Now, how did scientists even discover these hidden spaces? To uncover them, researchers used 2 satellites positioned 420 miles above Earth. They sent radar signals to the Giza Plateau, and these signals generated detailed images, which were later compiled into a 3D model of the underground layout, including the newly detected shafts. Then, using synthetic aperture radar or SAR technology, which is a type of radar that can penetrate through stone, the team also spotted 5 small room-like structures hidden deep within the pyramid. One of these chambers contained a sarcophagus, which was once thought to be the tomb of Pharaoh Khafre. But now, scientists believe this was a mistake. The true burial site is likely to be elsewhere. In any case, these 5 hidden rooms were completely unknown before the scans. They seem to be arranged in the center of the pyramid and are linked to underground pathways leading somewhere below the structure. There's an opinion that these tunnels could lead to more hidden chambers and wells. Some of them might be around 4,500 years old. Wow, what if they help us solve ancient civilization mysteries? Preliminary data suggests that all this underground space can be much more than a few empty chambers. There might be many more hidden structures near the Giza pyramids. How come? Well, the thing is, the structure appears to include hollowed-out sections with spiral pathways leading even deeper underground. Refining the images hinting at this could reveal an extensive subterranean network. It might be a whole city hidden under the surface. Now, despite the excitement surrounding these findings, there are also a lot of people who don't believe in the existence of the underground city. They're skeptical about the archaeological discovery in Egypt due to the lack of peer-reviewed verification. That's why several archaeologists and radar experts have challenged the validity of the claims. They've explained that the technology used to make the discovery may not be advanced enough to produce such detailed underground imagery. According to them, the 5 smaller chambers found near the surface could be natural formations, since the area had had sacred significance long before the construction of the pyramids. Some experts have even dismissed the use of radar methods in this context altogether. They call these methods scientifically unproven and question their accuracy. The discovery has also reignited discussions about ancient Egyptian myths and the possibility of hidden texts lying somewhere beneath the Giza pyramids. The layout of the newly detected underground chambers shares similarities with mythological accounts of the Hall of Records, a rumored chamber that could preserve early Egyptian wisdom. If confirmed, these findings could significantly reshape the understanding of Egypt's sacred topography. Plus, this lost city beneath Egypt's pyramid could become physical evidence of previously unknown underground structures. That's why the Khafre project is super eager to begin excavating to confirm their findings. But getting approval from Egyptian authorities is a challenging process. The discoveries still need to undergo peer review, before they are accepted by the academic community. By the way, this recent archaeological discovery in Egypt comes on the heels of another discovery involving a weird structure beneath the Royal Giza Cemetery, which researchers believe is unnatural in origin. Archaeologists used remote sensing techniques and uncovered a mysterious L-shaped structure underground in the Western Cemetery of Giza. This area is known to house burials of royal family members and high-ranking officials. Many of the tombs in the cemetery have above-ground mastabas, rectangular stone or mud brick structures with flat roofs. But there is an area in the center of the cemetery where there are no above-ground structures. To investigate this unexplored region, the team used electrical resistive tomography and ground-penetrating radar. ERT works by sending electrical currents into the ground and measuring the resistance to detect remains. As for GPR, it sends radar into the ground and maps the structures based on the radar's return. The team found an anomaly about 6.5 feet beneath the surface. It appeared to be an L-shaped structure measuring at least 33 feet in length. The readings suggested that the structure had been backfilled with sand after its construction. This made the team hypothesize that it could be a mix of sand and gravel, or possibly an air void. This anomaly was classified as a highly resistive structure, which meant it didn't occur naturally. Motoyuki Sato, the study's lead author and professor at Tohoku University in Japan, claims that the structure is not a natural formation due to its sharp shape. Another weird thing about ancient Egyptian pyramids is that historians have long believed that they were built primarily for royals and high-status individuals who had the wealth and power to create such massive structures. However, new research from the archaeological site of Tombos in modern-day Sudan challenges this assumption. The thing is, Tombos' pyramid may have served as burial sites for low-status workers as well as elites. The hard-working members of ancient communities may have found their last resting place in some of the most visible monuments, including the pyramids. Located along the Nile River in the ancient region of Nubia, Tombos became part of Egypt after its conquest of the area around 1400 BCE. That's when Egypt established the site to strengthen its colonial control. Workers at Tombos built pyramids, but those were much more modest than the famous pyramids of Giza. The research team reanalyzed 110 human skeletons from Tombos, originally studied in 2012. In particular, they examined the entheses, the areas where tendons and ligaments attach to bones. Such an analysis can give us insights into the amount of physical labor a person performed. When someone does hard labor, their bones often develop distinct crests and ridges at these attachment points due to the stress on the tendons and ligaments. And while some skeletons showed little change in their entheses, suggesting they belonged to individuals from the upper classes, others showed more serious changes. It means they belong to lower-class workers. This finding can totally challenge our earlier understanding of pyramid burials, especially the idea that only elites were buried in the pyramids, because the pyramids themselves were designed for the elite. This recent research may prove that lower-class workers may have found their final resting place in these monumental structures too. So, check out this creature. What do you think this thing is? Is it a plant, an animal, or maybe even some kind of wild fungus? At first glance, this fossil could pass for any of those ancient life forms, and honestly, scientists have been scratching their heads over it for over 150 years. But now, it looks like we might finally be cracking the case on this unknown species discovery. A long time ago, during the Devonian period, plants were just starting to grow on land. The tallest trees were only a few feet high, and animals hadn't even evolved backbones yet. Back then, massive natural towers up to 26 feet tall and 3 feet wide, looking like branchless cylindrical tree trunks, were rising from the ground. Hey, what a contrast with trees back then. When scientists first discovered fossils of those towering organisms, they were totally confused, as these strange prehistoric creatures didn't look like anything they'd seen before. Some thought they were weird cone-bearing trees. Others guessed they might be underwater plants like giant seaweed or lichens, which are partnerships between fungi and algae. The mysterious objects received a name, prototaxites. When scientists studied them up close, their internal structure reminded them of a bunch of different things. They couldn't believe a 20-foot-tall fungus or algae could be real, but that's what the fossils showed. Then most scientists decided that prototaxites were giant fungi. But still, something didn't feel right about it. In 2007, they decided to finally get the prototaxites mystery explained and ran a chemical test on the fossils. So they looked at the types of carbon inside them and compared them to regular plants from the same time. If prototaxites were plants, the carbon ratios would match, but they didn't. That means prototaxites weren't plants, and they receive carbon in a different way, not by photosynthesis, but probably more like fungi do. But then again, they look nothing like the mushrooms we know and love today. Prototaxites were giant, likely the largest living things on land at their time. And even if these strange prehistoric creatures were some fungi of their sort, then it's weird they don't have any living relatives today that would resemble them. So, if we put all this together, it looks like prototaxites are an entirely different and previously unknown life form that didn't leave any offspring. Now, prototaxites aren't the only unclassified organisms on Earth. About 600 million years ago, there were no fish, no sharks, no crabs. Just simple life forms like algae and bacteria drifting through calm, shallow seas. But some seriously strange creatures, completely unlike anything we see today, lived among them. They looked like underwater ferns, stood perfectly still, and absorbed nutrients straight from the water. These bizarre life forms were rangeomorphs. They ruled the oceans that were thick with nutrients back then. So rangeomorphs didn't need mouths, eyes, or muscles to survive and just soaked up whatever they needed. Some of them were as small as a finger, and others grew as tall as 6.5 feet. But as Earth entered the Cambrian period, the oceans became much more competitive. Fast-swimming creatures with limbs, eyes, and jaws showed up and ate the same food faster, and maybe even ate the rangeomorphs themselves. The chemistry of the oceans also started to shift, and the nutrient-rich waters became more like today's oceans, where food floats around in particles that active animals scoop up. So the rangeomorphs vanished forever, but scientists still find their fossils all over the world, preserved in ancient rock. They had an incredible fractal design, a pattern that repeated itself at every level, from the smallest branches to the full body. Using fossil clues, researchers built 3D computer models of what rangeomorphs looked like. They found out that these strange prehistoric creatures filled their space in a nearly perfect way. They were like optimized living sponges. But scientists still can't agree on where exactly rangeomorphs fit on the tree of life. At first, they argued over whether they were plants, animals, fungi, or something completely different. Now, most agree they were primitive animals, though they were so different that they might deserve their own unique branch, what scientists call a clade. And then there was Dickinsonia, another prehistoric creature that was so strange that scientists couldn't even agree on what it was for nearly 100 years. Some thought it was a giant single-celled amoeba. Others thought it was a type of lichen, or maybe a failed evolutionary experiment. This bizarre life form lived about 558 million years ago, long before dinosaurs, sharks, or even insects showed up. After many years of studies, Australian researchers finally got proof that Dickinsonia was an animal, and possibly the oldest one scientists have ever found. They solved the mystery thanks to really well-preserved fossil fat molecules stuck in the rock near the White Sea. These molecules were a type of cholesterol, the kind of fat found in animal cells. If cholesterol is present, it almost certainly came from an animal, sort of like animal DNA. Dickinsonia lived millions of years earlier than scientists had previously thought, and didn't look anything like modern animals. It had no head, no mouth, no arms, no legs, and definitely no organs. It was oval-shaped, like a giant pill bug or flattened jelly bean, with weird ridges running across its body. Some were tiny, but others grew up to 5 feet long, the size of a person. It didn't swim or walk, but was just lying on the seafloor, soaking up nutrients from the water or absorbing stuff through its skin. It was tricky to identify because most fossils came from high-pressure rock, where heat had destroyed all the delicate organic stuff scientists needed to study. To get to the good fossils, researchers had to rappel down 300-foot cliffs, dig out huge blocks of sandstone, throw them down, wash them, and then repeat the process. And inside one of those sandstone slabs was the fossil that changed everything. That helped finally confirm that Dickinsonia was an animal, which proves that complex animal life existed before the Cambrian diversification, where tons of new animals with bones, eyes, and limbs suddenly appeared. Scientists think the spot where they found these fossils might hold more clues about ancient life. For a long time, scientists had no clue what other group of ancient life forms, slime molds, were. These weird jelly-like blobs that pulse and ooze on rotten logs and forest floors aren't fungi like mushrooms, though people thought they were for years. It turns out they're more like amoebas, squishy, single-celled organisms that can move around. There are over 900 species of slime molds all over the world. You'll find them in soil, leaf litter, and especially on decaying wood. Scientists found them trapped in amber from 100 million years ago, and it looks just like modern slime molds. Scientists still know very little about how slime molds interact with other species, what role they play in ecosystems, or how they think without a brain, nerves, or a control center. But somehow, they can make decisions and adapt to their surroundings. That makes them a lot like social insects, like ants or bees, where no single bug is in charge, but the colony still works together as a smart group. Even without brains, scientists have trained slime molds to solve mazes just by responding to chemicals and learning from their environment. One way these organisms learn is through a process called habituation. It's sort of like how you get used to cold water after jumping in a lake, or stop noticing an annoying buzzing noise after a few minutes. That's your brain helping you tune out something harmless. Some slime molds can do this too. If they get in nasty conditions, like salty, dry, acidic environments or chemicals, they'll avoid them at first. But if there's food on the other side, they'll eventually get used to it and push their way through. And if you let slime mold go dormant and wake up a year later, it still remembers how to deal with salt. They even seem to be able to decide where to go based on where they found food in the past. With more and more unknown species discoveries, scientists can paint a better picture of Earth's biological past.
Let's face it, most ancient tombs have been looted at least once. No matter how scary the rumors could have been, most mummies were open too. But one. This is the Bashiri mummy, and it puzzles everyone so much that nobody dares to see what's inside. Meet Howard, but you must know him already if you're into Egyptian history. He's primarily famous for discovering King Tut's tomb back in 1922. But few people know that before this revolutionary discovery, he had probably found another mummy. It happened in 1919, and it goes by several names, either the Bashiri mummy or the Mummy of Pacheri, or the Untouchable One. Some reports say that Howard stumbled upon the Bashiri mummy in Luxor's Valley of the Kings, just where he would later find Tut's tomb. Despite this find, not much is known about this particular mummy. The reason why it's still unharmed in any way is not because of some superstitions, but because nobody is sure that they can undo what they do if something goes wrong. The mummy is so intricately wrapped that researchers never unfurled it for fear of irreversible damage. The golden rule of anyone who works with antiquities: if you're not sure you can't make it better or preserve it unchanged, do not touch it. History knows many examples of ancient relics ruined beyond repair, say Ecce Homo, or smiling statue restoration. The delicate fabric that covers the mummy's face has this cool design that kind of looks like a pyramid. The researchers are not 100% sure, but this might be the only one of its kind with that embalming style. But without knowing the ancient technique, it's next to impossible not to ruin the mummy while unwrapping and wrapping it back. Back in the day, people, both experts and looters, would unwrap mummies for all sorts of reasons, mostly to study them. Luckily, these days, we have advanced tech that lets us check out what's inside a sarcophagus without having to unwrap anything. After taking a closer look at the Bashiri mummy, researchers figured out that it belonged to a man who was around 5.5 feet tall and lived during the Ptolemaic era, which makes this mummy roughly 2,300 years old. The Egypt Museum shared that the X-ray scan also uncovered an inscription of the guy's name, but it's a bit tricky to tell if it says Pacheri or Nenu, adding to the intrigue. The museum also pointed out that the fancy casing the mummy is in features all sorts of decorated scenes. You can see the mummy lying on a bed, flanked by deities Isis and Nephthys, along with the 4 sons of Horus. Plus, there are 2 images of the funerary god Anubis at the feet of the casing. By the way, Bashiri mummy is not the only one that has remained untouched. This is Issa Temkebde, and Gaston Maspero, a French archaeologist, made the decision to leave her mummy untouched, wanting to keep her resting peacefully since she was in such amazing shape. He did mention, though, that her tomb had been raided long ago. Thanks to some X-ray work, we learned more about the mummy. The scans revealed a few artifacts still wrapped up with the wife of a high priest, including amulets around her neck, right arm, and forehead. The X-rays also showed she had some dental issues and arthritis in her knees. While she passed away as an older woman, it's tough to pinpoint her exact age. However, various sources from her son's reign indicate that she was held in high regard in the kingdom. Isatemkebt served as the sister wife of Penejam II. You got me right, they were related by blood and were siblings, but back then it was pretty common to get married this way to preserve the purity of the bloodline. Say that to Habsburg, duh. Their chase for purity only led to inbreeding and the notorious Habsburg's jaw. Right, I guess we should not judge ancient Egyptian rules and morals, but what we can say for sure is that both Bashiri and Isatemkebt were incredibly lucky to stay untouched. The odds were not in King Tut's favor, though. The researchers' work hit him hard. The tomb itself was discovered in 1922, but it wasn't until 1925 that the nested coffins were opened during an excavation. The outer coffin, held together with silver pins, opened up to show another coffin shaped like a mummy, decorated with colorful glass and flower garlands. There were worries about the king's mummy because it had been exposed to moisture. The middle coffin was pretty heavy and didn't have any handles, so they had to be super careful taking it out. Inside the innermost coffin, which was solid gold and wrapped in a red cloth, they found the royal mummy, and this all went down on October 28, 1925. Tutankhamun's mummy, measuring about 6.07 feet, fit snugly into the innermost coffin, which was 6.17 feet long. You can already tell there was a problem, right? Imagine how hard it is to extract something as fragile as an ancient dried-up mummy, especially when there's not much room for maneuver. Plus, the mummy looked sus. It was pitch black. Howard Carter, the lead archaeologist of the expedition, estimated that around 2 buckets worth of oils had been poured over the mummy. But care had been taken to avoid the mask and feet. It was made to preserve him better. The body was positioned at a slight angle in the coffin, and there was a noticeable difference in the amount of dark oils on the right and left sides, indicating that the coffin might have tilted while being lowered into the sarcophagus. This oil created moisture inside the coffins, and over time, it reacted chemically, which Carter described as a sort of slow, spontaneous combustion, leading to the carbonization of the linen wrappings. Unfortunately, the combination of heat and moisture took a toll on the mummy's trappings as well. The crook and flail fell apart, the resin scarab cracked, and the threads holding the hands and mummy's bands started to decay, making everything quite fragile. Plus, the oils hardened over the years, effectively gluing the mummy and mask to the coffin's bottom. To try and separate the mummy from the inner and middle coffins, they were placed in the sun for several hours, reaching temperatures of 149 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite this effort, the mummy remained stuck, so the initial examination had to be done right where it was. The first part of Tutankhamun's mummy the researchers checked out was his lower legs and feet, meaning they started the examination from the bottom up. As they peeled back the bandages, they uncovered the first of many treasures wrapped up with the king. They took their time to carefully document and photograph everything they found. The inner layers of bandages were in pretty bad shape, mostly turning to dust, making it tough to figure out how everything was originally wrapped. Still, the overall methods matched what was seen in other nobles' mummies from that time. Lots of folded linen pads were used to shape the torso and thighs. The outer and inner bandages were made from fine linen, while the middle layers were coarser. They had some intricate bandaging around the shoulders and chest with a similar style around the groin. Each limb, along with fingers and toes, which were fitted with gold caps, was wrapped separately. Tutankhamun even wore gold foil sandals on his feet. They hoped to separate the mummy from the coffin by removing the outer bandages, but the resins had stuck the body to the coffin. So, the researchers ended up chiseling it out. To do this, they had to cut the torso in half at the hips and disarticulate the arms to continue unwrapping. Each part was treated with hot paraffin wax for stability, and later the hands and feet were reattached with resin. Finally, they used hot knives to detach the head from the mask. To check the teeth, it was decided to make an incision around the jaw and neck, which was later fixed with resin. So technically, the scientists did all they could to preserve the mummy, but still, in a way, it ended up being damaged beyond repair. What do you think? Should they have left it in the coffin? Or did they do the right thing? Let us know in the comments. Stonehenge is famous, but it isn't the oldest UK monument of its kind in England. That title belongs to Flagstones, a site that predates Stonehenge by about 200 years. In fact, it's possible that whoever built Stonehenge might have been copycats, or perhaps, as some prefer, inspired by flagstones. Let's start unraveling the mystery of flagstones by looking at its exact age. To crack this ancient puzzle, scientists turned to a powerful technique: radiocarbon dating prehistoric monuments. This method works on organic materials like wood, bone, or charcoal that are up to about 60,000 years old. Each of these materials contains something called carbon-14. When an organism passes away, its carbon-14 starts to break down at a predictable rate. By measuring how much is left, scientists can estimate the age of these ancient objects. The method is really impressive, so it doesn't come as a surprise that the inventor of this method was awarded the Nobel Prize. Radiocarbon dating has revealed that people built flagstones around 3200 BCE, making it older than even the earliest parts of Stonehenge. But the mystery of flagstones is just beginning to unfold. Flagstones is located in Dorset, in southwest England, about 37 miles away from Stonehenge. It was discovered in the 1980s when workers were building a new road. Archaeologists dug up a huge circular ditch about 330 feet wide, made with overlapping pits. Inside the pits, they found the remains of at least 7 people, a cremated adult, 3 young individuals, and 3 other adults whose bodies were partly cremated. This shows that people could have used the site as an ancient cremation burial site. Flagstones is basically a big, ancient circle that popped up right where early farming communities were spending their time. If you went there today, you wouldn't see any obvious walls or banks, but if you look inside the pits that make up the circle, you'll find chalk rubble from both sides. That's a clue that when people dug these pits, they used the dirt and chalk they took out to build up banks both inside and outside the circle. This special spot sits right in the middle of a whole bunch of other really old monuments and sites, which were built over thousands of years during the Neolithic and Bronze Ages. Experts have figured out the ages of some of these nearby places really well. For example, the ditch at Maiden Castle dates back to around 3600 BCE, and the Big Henge at Mount Pleasant was built around 2600 BCE. Today, half of Flagstones is under that road, and the other half is under an old historic house looked after by the National Trust. You can find objects from the site at the Dorset Museum. Because flagstones and early Stonehenge look so similar, with round enclosures, pits, and cremated burials, scientists used to think they appeared at the same time. But thanks to radiocarbon dating, we now know flagstones, this ancient cremation burial site, is the earliest big circular monument ever found in Britain. To figure out how old the site really is, researchers tested things like human bones, red deer antlers, and charcoal found there. One of the most puzzling discoveries was a young man who was buried under a huge sarsen stone in the middle of the circle. Someone left him there about 1,000 years after people used the site for the first time. This find just added to the mystery of flagstones. You're probably wondering about the flagstones versus Stonehenge comparison. Well, the latter is a mystery on its own, a big old circle of giant stones in the south of England. Those who made it didn't write anything down, so we don't know exactly what they were thinking. One old tale says that King Arthur's wizard, Merlin, used magic to move the stones from Ireland, where giants had put them together. Another story says that people from Denmark built it. Today, some people think extraterrestrial visitors made it. A man named John Aubrey started studying Stonehenge in the 1660s. He thought the Celts had built it for their priests, called Druids, but that turned out to be wrong. Radiocarbon dating of this prehistoric monument shows that its constructors built it in phases over several centuries. The construction started around 3100 BCE and continued till around 1600 BCE. First, about 5,000 years ago, it was just a round ditch in the ground. Then people added wooden posts. Around 2600 BCE, they brought big blue stones from Wales. Later, they added sarsens, even bigger stones, each weighing as much as 5 elephants. They moved those stones from 19 miles away and placed them in a big circle with 5 tall stone arches shaped like a horseshoe. Experts think building Stonehenge took more than 20 million hours of hard work. And that's a lot of teamwork, strength, and planning for people who didn't even have machines. These days, there are a few different ideas about what Stonehenge was really used for. Some experts think it was a sacred place where people gathered for religious ceremonies. Others believe it was an early kind of science center used to study the sky and track time. Both groups notice that the stones at Stonehenge are lined up with the sun and moon, so people may have used the site to mark the changing seasons, especially during the summer and winter solstices. Some think it worked like a giant calendar, helping people figure out dates or predict things like solar eclipses. Stonehenge was an ancient cremation burial site too, at least for some time. Anyway, if we continue with the flagstones versus Stonehenge comparison, we can't but dwell more on the age of these monuments. Flagstones is older than Stonehenge. In fact, it's one of the oldest UK monuments. It's really special because it's the most ancient big round enclosure ever found in Britain. According to the newest studies, its age is about 5,200 years old. After it was built, more and more round monuments started popping up in other places too. Before its construction, most ancient monuments were long and straight, like rectangular barrows or burial mounds, or long ditches called cursus monuments. Some had even more random shapes, but the flagstones monument shows a big change. People were starting to build in circles instead. Some experts think this idea of circular monuments might have come from Ireland, where people were already burying cremated bodies in round tombs. On the other hand, even though flagstones has turned out to be older than Stonehenge, the new findings suggest that Stonehenge might need to be redated. Some of the objects found at Stonehenge, like animal bones, are actually older than the main structure itself. For example, near the entrances to Stonehenge, archaeologists found deer bones and cattle skulls that date to around 3,200 BCE. Experts used to think that people kept those bones for a long time before burying them. But it's possible there was an early version of Stonehenge made from overlapping pits that existed before the big circular ditch was built around 2,900 BCE. Now, could flagstones and Stonehenge have been part of a bigger shared tradition? Could there have been other ancient cremation burial sites in the UK? After all, these constructions aren't the only round prehistoric monuments in Britain. In Wales, there's a similar site called Llandagai, which also looks like a circular burial place. Such a way of burying the deceased might have been a common custom across the UK because you can see similar structures in Eastern Ireland. In the Boyne Valley, for example, there are ancient places like the Mound of the Hostages that people used in the same way. Now, researchers want to do more digging in Ireland to see if some of those monuments were built before 3200 BCE. If they're even older than flagstones, they might help explain where the idea of building round burial sites started and why people across Britain and Ireland were building them. The more we learn, the better we'll understand what these sites were really for and how the people back then might have shared beliefs and traditions across the sea. Hopefully, one day, we'll figure out the mystery of flagstones, one of the oldest monuments in the UK. Whoa! It's a huge flying island right above your head. In the era of AI, you may think it's nothing but a neural network video, but let me tell you that first, it's very much real. 2, if you want, you can as well visit it. It may even hold the key to the El Dorado secret. This place is called Roraima, and it's actually not an island at all. It's a mountain. Due to a number of factors, we get this vision of an island floating somewhere above us. But it's all about the flat top this mountain has. There's no standard peak, so it looks flat and the thick clouds get blended into the skies, thus creating this optical illusion. Despite the advancements in satellite technology and affordable air travel, there are still few places on Earth that feel truly uncharted. Like Mount Roraima is one of them. It's been around for almost 2 billion years, and it's one of the oldest formations on our planet. For comparison, dinosaurs appeared somewhere around 240 million years ago. Some scientists believe that this area used to be a part of the supercontinent called Gondwanaland. And back then, it wasn't yet a mountain. When the supercontinent split apart, the erosion created this magnificent tabletop mountain. But what's interesting about this place is not the age, but the fact that it still looks prehistoric. It's almost untouched. The reason for that is late exploration of this part of South America. By the way, we still discover new flora and fauna species living there every year. For a mountain, it's relatively short, only 9,220 feet. There are cities located at a higher pitch above sea level, say La Paz in Bolivia, whose elevation is 11,940 feet. So people could be living in the area of Mount Roraima too, despite its hard-to-get location. But there's a twist to it. The Pemon people are the original inhabitants of this region, and they have an incredibly rich tradition of myths. For instance, their mythology features deities that live on the Tepui, which are flat-topped mountains found in the grasslands. These mountains are considered sacred and are off-limits to the living since they're believed to be the dwelling places of ancestor spirits known as Mawari. So, there are traditions that restrict living in this area, but still, some sources claim that local communities do dwell there. But, obviously, modern problems lie not only in the spirits, but in very much limited job opportunities there. However, guided tours are actually available. So what will you see if you ever dare to visit this place? At the base of the mountain lies an evergreen rainforest featuring trees that range in height from 82 to 150 feet, with some specimens reaching up to 200 feet. Some of them are endemic for sure, meaning that it's the only place in the world where you can find them. Like, you can find orchids as large as a medium-sized tree. It's not a surprise because due to the remoteness of this place, species here may have followed a completely different evolutionary trail, unlike most of the flora and fauna on our planet. Next, you have all the chances to stumble upon a waterfall at the base of Roraima that's been flowing for millions of years. Fun fact, there are no rivers on Roraima summit. but the rainfall seeping through the porous rocks create this incredible view. All combined together make it look like some lost world, right? By the way, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was inspired by Tepui, these tabletop mountains, when he was writing his The Lost World novel. Yep, it's not only Sherlock he was famous for. Among these natural wonders, Roraima stands out as the most accessible Tepui. There are more similar formations, but they're way less trek-friendly. Yeah, amongst other mountains, Roraima may be the easiest to get to, but still, it is very hard to get there, even taking into account all the modern technologies. So, how did the discovery happen? Hard to say for sure, but there is a theory backed up by official records. Back in the 16th century, here was this Sir Walter Raleigh. Look at his fancy collar and mustache. He was one of the most important people during the Elizabethan period. In 1594, he got to know about a great golden city near the Caroni River. That idea stuck in his mind. Maybe it was something like a get-rich-quick scheme for him. Anyways, 1 year later, he went to explore what is now Guyana and eastern Venezuela, and he described precisely Mount Roraima. On March 22, 1595, an English fleet led by Walter Raleigh showed up off the coast of Trinidad. Raleigh tried to make nice with the Spanish settlers there by trading and even inviting them aboard his ships for some entertainment. After a few drinks, the Spaniards opened up about a person having some particular activities in Guyana, sharing insights about the land's geography and the treasures they believed were hidden inland. Fast forward to April 7th, Raleigh pulled off a surprise attack on the town of San Jose and managed to capture this very person. After squeezing him for information, Raleigh declared his own plan to head into Guyana on a quest for the legendary Golden City. Since his ships couldn't navigate the narrow channels of the Orinoco Delta, Raleigh had his carpenters modify one of them, likely a galleass, to only draw 5 feet of water. This ship could carry 60 men, while another 40 were split among smaller boats. Progress was slow as they navigated through the delta, getting lost in what Raleigh described as a labyrinth of rivers. Eventually, they made their way to the Caño Manamo, and then into the main Orinoco River. A bit further upstream, where the Orinoco meets the Caroni, Raleigh encountered a native chief named Topiawari, and they hit it off. Topiawari revealed that his people had been pushed out of inland Guyana by a fierce tribe from the west. This fed into the prevailing belief, shared by both the Spanish and Raleigh, that El Dorado was home to runaway Incas from Peru. Topiawari also mentioned that the invading tribe was rich in gold, claiming that their nearest town, just a 4-day trek south, was the source of gold plates that were being traded far and wide. But he hinted that even finer treasures lay deeper in the land. Raleigh then made his way to the mouth of the Caroni, but strong currents halted any further progress. He sent out 2 scouting groups on land, while he led a 3rd one. They unearthed a few shiny stones that they eagerly dug out of the ground, but most turned out to be worthless. They learned that a massive lake about 40 miles wide lay at the head of the Caroni, filled with alluvial gold. However, with no way to move forward and the Orinoco's waters rising, Raleigh had to call off the expedition, hoping to come back when conditions were better. It wasn't until 1616, over 20 years later, that Raleigh got the go-ahead from James I for a 2nd try in Guyana. He assured the king he could retrieve a lot of gold from a mine near the Caroni that he had heard about on his earlier trip. James specifically ordered him not to clash with the Spanish, who were still controlling the Orinoco area. When Raleigh arrived in South America, he stayed on the ship while sending Lawrence Kemmys and a team to look for the mine. For reasons that remain unclear, Kemmys ended up attacking and capturing the Spanish town of Santo Tomé, resulting in the demise of Raleigh's son Wat during the skirmish. Unable to find the mine, the crew returned to the ship, and facing Raleigh's anger, Kemmys took his own life. Back in England, Raleigh was put on trial for allegedly lying about the mine and trying to provoke a conflict with Spain, which ultimately led to his execution. Or maybe those were the Maori spirits who didn't appreciate the intrusion. We all grew up believing that Stonehenge is the world's most ancient observatory, but now it has some serious competition for the title. Nabta Playa was built more than 2,000 miles away in southern Egypt and thousands of years before Stonehenge and even the pyramids of Giza. In 1973, a Bedouin guide stumbled upon a strange group of huge stone formations while crossing the Sahara Desert. He led American archaeologist Fred Wendorf to the site, located about 60 miles from the Nile. Wendorf's friend and colleague claims the team found the stones while stopping for a bathroom break in the desert. Either way, what they found changed history. At first, Wendorf thought the stone structures were just natural formations. But then it hit him. This area was once a lake, meaning no natural rocks should even be there. He kept coming back to the site for decades, and by the early 1990s, his team finally uncovered a circle of stones that seemed to line up with the stars in a way no one could explain. After 7 long years of trying to crack the mystery of the site, Wendorf reached out to an expert in archaeoastronomy. They study how ancient people used the stars. One evening, while the expert sat in the cool desert sand staring at the stones, he realized that they formed a pattern radiating outward from a massive burial mound. One by one, as they dug into the sediment, the buried megaliths started lining up like spokes on a wheel. The team had already used radiocarbon dating to test samples from fire hearths and tamarisk wood roofing found inside the stone circle. Nabta Playa had dozens of standing stones, all a few feet tall. Some of them lined up exactly with the sunrise on special days, and others matched up with bright stars in the sky. Inside the big circle, there were 6 special stones that may have been used for rituals or marking important times of the year. Around them, 29 standing stones might have worked like a simple calendar to help people know when it was time for something important, like the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. When the sun rose in just the right spot, it was a sign that the rainy season was coming. The stone circle once aligned with the brightest stars in the northern sky: Arcturus, Sirius, and Alpha Centauri. Some stones even pointed to the constellation Orion. By tracing Arcturus's movement across the sky, they figured out that it matched perfectly with the circle around 4800 BCE. That means it was the oldest astronomical site ever discovered. And the people of Nabta Playa may have been watching the stars thousands of years before telescopes were even invented. It looks like it had a huge meaning for people living and traveling through the desert. Over 10,000 years ago, the long, cold, and dry ice age that lasted for tens of thousands of years was finally fading away. Northern Africa got massive monsoons and rains that filled up seasonal lakes. So, parts of the desert turned into short-lived oases. For the nomadic people who roamed this harsh land, these summer rains were everything. Their entire way of life revolved around cattle. When archaeologists opened the central tomb at Nabta Playa, they dug up cattle bones and even a massive rock carved into the shape of a cow. The people who built it used the stars to guide them and find hidden watering holes like Nabta Playa, which likely held water for about 4 months a year, starting with the summer monsoons. But there was no North Star back then, so instead they navigated using bright stars and the way the sky seemed to spin in circles above them. When the lakes were full, the standing stones would be partly submerged, and from the western shore, you would see the reflection of the stars on the dark water. Nabta Playa is way less famous than Stonehenge, perhaps because its stones were buried and the famous site in England was open to visitors for thousands of years. Sadly, when Nabta Playa did become famous, some tourists ruined parts of it by moving stones around, which messed up the ancient star alignments. To protect it, the authorities moved everything to a museum where people can see the stones and the carved cow statue without damaging them. The Egyptian observatory isn't the only construction similar to Stonehenge. It has versions that were used for different purposes, from Germany and France to the US and the Andes in northern Peru. This last one is actually one of the oldest big structures ever built in this region. The circular plaza is made of two giant stone walls arranged in a ring. It was likely used for ceremonies and gatherings. Scientists have carbon dated it to be about 4,750 years old, which means it was built before the Great Pyramids of Egypt and Stonehenge. The plaza had two entrances and a special layer of clay, soil, gravel, and charcoal underneath. It was carefully planned and built. Archaeologists also found ceramic pieces, quartz crystals, and gemstones at the site, so it was definitely a special place. People visited it for centuries, but at some point it was sealed off, probably because of changing beliefs and traditions. The most recent discovery was the remains of a large timber circle roughly the same age and with parallels to Stonehenge, all the way up in Denmark. This open-air structure was likely part of a special area where prehistoric people from the late Neolithic and early Bronze Age gathered for rituals and ceremonies. The circle was made up of 45 giant wooden posts, forming a huge ring about 100 feet wide. The wood is gone now, but scientists believe tall timbers once stood in the holes and created an impressive wood henge. No one knows exactly what these circles were used for, but archaeologists have found animal bones and food remains at similar sites. So people probably used to gather there for feasts and rituals. In 2024, scientists found two ancient stone circles from the Neolithic period in Dartmoor National Park in England. Some archaeologists believe they might form a sacred ark. Many of Dartmoor's stone structures were built in a curved shape on the high ground in the center of the area. A long time ago, Dartmoor was covered in forests, so people may have used the high ground as important markers. One of the newly found circles fits inside this ark, but the other one is outside of it, to the north. This could have been an entrance point into the ark. There's also a raised bank of earth near the stones, which looks similar to other famous Neolithic sites, like the Ring of Brodgar in Scotland and Stonehenge itself. This means the people who built these circles may have visited Stonehenge or been inspired by it. Archaeologists in Oman found ancient stone monuments called tralith, which got the nickname Arabian Stonehenge. They were finished about 2,000 years ago, but no one knows for sure who built them or why. Scientists also found stone hand axes that are incredibly old, between 300,000 and 1.3 million years old, from the time when the first humans left Africa. At another site in central Oman, archaeologists discovered a Neolithic tomb from around 5,000 to 4,600 BCE. There are two chambers with the bones of dozens of people inside beneath a giant megalithic structure. Nearby, they also discovered rock carvings that were made by people who lived in the area. And then there is another Stonehenge look-alike, this time in Saudi Arabia, that was used as an apartment complex thousands of years ago. Archaeologists discovered a total of 345 stone circles by looking at aerial photos of a lava field. Each circle is between 13 to 26 feet and has at least one large standing stone in the middle. These structures still have remains of stone walls and doorways. Stone circles like Stonehenge are often linked to ceremonies and rituals, but scientists say that many early houses were actually built in round shapes, and rectangular homes only became common much later in history. In 2021, while drilling about 11 feet beneath the surface of permafrost in northeastern Siberia, researchers uncovered a 24,000-year-old frozen life form. And then, they brought it to life. Before cloning it, or better said, it cloned itself. This might sound like the beginning of a sinister horror story, but don't worry, it's actually quite the opposite. What scientists unearthed was a microscopic frozen organism that could fundamentally reshape what we think about evolution and survival. The uncovered tiny creatures are called bedelloid rotifers, microscopic animals with little wheel-like mouths that they use both for moving and feeding. They were first discovered in 1696 and are fairly common in freshwater environments around the world, with a few saltwater species. They might seem unremarkable, but scientists have been studying them since early microscopes made it possible to actually see them. Because even though there are only a few dozen microns wide, they're surprisingly complex, with brains, guts, muscles, and reproductive systems. Could it be that within that complexity lies the secret to ultimate resilience, maybe even for us humans? Let's break it down. These creatures are extremophiles. That means they can survive being completely drained of water at any point in their life cycle, then lie dormant until rehydrated. But that's not all. They can also persevere through some of the harshest conditions on Earth, or in outer space, or even being stuck in the Siberian permafrost wasteland for tens of thousands of years. This is possible because they can enter cryptobiosis, a condition where organisms pause their metabolism and become nearly inactive. It may sound sciencey, but actually, some of the everyday products we eat are stored in a fridge thanks to this phenomenon. Take yeast, for example. Live yeast cells are surrounded by a protective layer made of dead cells and some nutrients. You can keep yeast at room temperature, but if cryptobiosis comes into play, in the form of your fridge or freezer, it stores much better and longer. During cryptobiosis, rotifers accumulate protective compounds like chaperone proteins, which help them repair and recover once favorable conditions return. Chaperone proteins are like tiny bodyguards. Their job is to keep other proteins in the cell from falling apart under pressure. When the body is stressed, whether from heat, cold, toxins, dehydration, or just the natural aging process, the proteins inside our cells can start to misfold. Proteins need to be folded into very specific shapes to function properly, and when that structure breaks down, they become useless, or worse, harmful. Misfolded proteins can pile up and interfere with normal cell function. In some cases, they clump together in ways that poison the cell. This kind of damage is even linked to serious health conditions. So, if rotifers have developed powerful proteins that prevent cellular chaos even under extreme conditions, could we use them to protect human cells from diseases and aging? By analyzing the age of the ice they were found in, scientists figured out that these frozen rotifers were at least 24,000 years old. That's a huge leap from earlier studies, which showed they could survive frozen for only about 10 years. Now that's what you call record-breaking. This period of Earth's history is known as the Late Pleistocene Epoch, a time dominated by the Ice Age, which means these invertebrates were lying dormant when Manny and Sid were having their adventure while roaming the icy landscapes, along with saber-toothed cats and giant ground sloths. Fun fact: although animated movies like Ice Age show woolly mammoths as huge, towering giants, they were actually about the same size and weight as today's average African elephant. Nature and evolution can be so cruel, yet fascinatingly unpredictable. Massive, menacing beasts that came from the Ice Age couldn't survive it, yet something tiny and weird, like a bedelloid, could. But regarding our unfrozen creature, after the soil thawed, the organism didn't just begin moving again, it also started reproducing. This is thanks to an ability called parthenogenesis, a specific form of reproduction in which embryos develop from unfertilized eggs, allowing them to reproduce independently. It really is like cloning, but it happens naturally. Many organisms, such as certain insects, reptiles, and even some birds, are capable of parthenogenesis, at least under specific conditions. For example, in honeybees, males develop from unfertilized eggs through parthenogenesis, making them genetic copies of their mother. However, parthenogenesis is often seen as an evolutionary disadvantage because it limits genetic diversity, meaning that most species that reproduce this way eventually face extinction. Despite this, bedelloid rotifers have diversified into over 450 distinct species over millions of years, which is extremely rare. Scientists believe their survival comes down to a few evolutionary adaptations. They can pause their metabolism through cryptobiosis, repair their DNA with specialized proteins, and even borrow useful genes from other organisms using a process called horizontal gene transfer. Unlike most animals, which rely solely on inherited DNA, these organisms can steal genetic material from bacteria, fungi, and even plants, splicing foreign genes into their genome to gain new survival traits. Some studies have shown that up to 10% of their active genome comes from foreign DNA. This could explain their extraordinary resilience. They borrow genes for stress resistance, toxin breakdown, or radiation repair, essentially patching and upgrading their DNA in real time. It's not like the mind flare from Stranger Things, where the creature absorbs another organism to improve itself and grow. It's more like a spy stealing a blueprint from a rival lab to learn its secrets. When cells rupture, for example, when bacteria die nearby, bdelloids scoop up loose DNA fragments and integrate them into their own genome. Interestingly, the usual expected lifespan of bdelloid rotifers under normal circumstances is only 2 weeks. The soil sample that contained these rotifers also held nematodes, or roundworms, another group of tiny survivors already known to withstand tens of thousands of years icebound. This isn't just limited to microscopic animals. Researchers have successfully regrown Antarctic moss and entire Campion plants from seeds and samples frozen for hundreds or even thousands of years. In 2016, a team of Japanese scientists brought tardigrades, or simply water bears, back to life after 30 years in cryptobiosis. Tardigrades are even more impressive because they can live in a suspended state for up to 30 years, without food or water, and with temperature swings from deep freeze to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. These guys can also endure crushing deep-sea pressures, vacuum, microgravity, and intense radiation of space. Remember when we said earlier that these species can survive the harshest conditions on Earth and beyond? It wasn't an exaggeration, and now you understand why. And it's exactly why NASA and its partners sent water bears and bdelloid rotifers into orbit. They've even been aboard the ISS, helping scientists understand how these animals handle microgravity, radiation, and stress. Not only that, but in 2007, the European Space Agency launched a bunch of tardigrades into low Earth orbit, completely exposed. No suit, no shield, floating in a vacuum. They were blasted by cosmic radiation, UV light 1,000 times stronger than what hits Earth's surface, and temperatures near absolute zero. And when they came back, most of them woke up and reproduced despite the harsh conditions they were exposed to. This ties into an old theory called panspermia, the idea that life didn't originate on Earth but arrived here, locked in space dust or trapped inside a meteorite. Before, maybe it sounded like a fringe science, but when organisms can brush off cosmic radiation, then it doesn't seem so far-fetched, does it? What about humans? Does this mean we now fully understand the way hibernation works and are close to putting humans in this state? Sorry for spoiling it for you, but it still feels more like science fiction. However, researching rotifers, water bears, and similar organisms can lead to massive breakthroughs in other fields. Their resilience might be a blueprint for medicine, for reshaping what it means to age, maybe even to pause life itself, or extend it. We're talking real, practical innovations, from better preservation of human organs for transplantation to drugs that slow aging at the cellular level. And yes, maybe even cryogenic hibernation, long enough to make interstellar travel possible.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more,